Good evening, everyone. I wish to respectfully recognize the Coast Salish nations upon whose traditional territory we are located. The first item on the agenda tonight is a public hearing, and I want to call that public hearing for Monday, March the 6th, 2017 to order. I'm now going to ask the corporate officer to introduce the public hearing process and the first item on the agenda, Bylaw 2000-102. Mrs. Kaler, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The public hearing tonight is to consider Zoning and Development Bylaw, Amendment Bylaw 2006, number 2000-102. The purpose of the proposed amendment is to modify the existing Comprehensive Development CD2 zone in order to facilitate additional bumper boats and other fairground uses on the property described as 375 Island Highway West and legally described as Lot 1, District Lot 89, Nanoose District, Plan 4879. The purpose of the public hearing is to hear from those who consider their interest in the property to be affected. This is not for debate, and we would ask that when people come to the microphone, they state their name and address for the record, and the public hearing will commence when the mayor is ready.
One question before we start. Have we received any correspondence or any phone calls up to 4 o'clock this afternoon?
No, we have not.
So the first call for anyone who would like to speak to come forward to the microphone and give their name and civic address for the record. I never know how long to wait here. For the second time, I'm going to invite anyone who would like to come forward and speak to the to this zoning and development bylaw amendment. For a third and final time, I'd like to invite anyone who would like to speak to come forward and speak at the table here where the microphone is. Seeing that there are no speakers, I'm going to ask for a motion to terminate the public hearing for Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 2000.102. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beale. Do I have any objections? All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Okay, thank you very much. So now I need a motion to adjourn. Do I not, Mrs. Keeler? We terminated the public hearing. Is that sufficient? Okay, thank you. All right. So we're going to move right into the this evening's agenda. So good evening and welcome to the March 6th regular meeting of Council, everyone. Thank you for coming. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes of the special council meeting held February 16th, 2017. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Beale, seconded by Councillor Burton. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. The second item is the minutes of the council meeting held February 20th, 2017. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillors Powell and seconded by Councillor Beale. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. The next, I need an approval of the agenda. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Are there any errors or omissions in the agenda? All those in favor? Thank you. We have one presentation tonight, a very important presentation. Earlier this year, the city entered into an agreement with the Vancouver Island University and students to conduct a community park master plan and park survey. This project is under the guidance of Dr. Pam Shaw, Director of the Master of Community Planning Program at VIU. Welcome, Dr. Shaw, if you want to come up and take a chair. The project is well underway, and I was fortunate to meet with some of the students this past Saturday at the end of their successful Parks on the Street Day. They are here tonight to talk to us about what they have accomplished to date Students making the presentation, I see Dr. Shaw is not going to make a presentation. Students will make the presentation, Devan Cronshaw, Sarah Holden, and Janet Smyrski. So welcome once again, and I gather somebody's missing. Who's missing? Janet, you're not making the presentation, no? You can move a chair up here if you want. You're okay? All right. All right, we want to give everybody a chance. So I guess Devan and Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. And before I get started, on behalf of all the students from VIU involved in this project, we want to say thank you for offering this opportunity for us. We definitely see the value in being partnered with Parksville, and through the help of Pam Shaw, we're definitely really looking forward to all the opportunities that this will provide us. You know, we've been to Parksville doing ground truthing of the inventory, and our first public engagement session was this past weekend, and we've really just been enjoying the opportunity. So thank you. So, as introduced, my name is Devan, and this is Sarah. And this is a quick presentation, a brief presentation on the Community Park Master Plan and Parks Survey project. So the outline for our presentation here will give a brief project introduction, what we've completed thus far, moving forward, what we'll be completing up until our next conversation in May, and we'll talk about our first public engagement session that was this past Saturday, Parks on the Street Day. So, as mentioned, the project is based under two main pillars, and the first one is the Comprehensive Community Parks Master Plan, and the other is the Parksville Park Survey. Many of the activities that will be happening throughout will sort of be interwoven between the two, but under the Comprehensive Community Park Master Plan pillar, we'll be completing a detailed site analysis and asset inventory. We'll be involved in regular communication with the city. We've created a communications plan and a work plan that will be communicating as well regularly. 3 major public consultation events will occur: 2 World Cafes and an open house, as well as a survey, and then a final report which will be presented to Council, Mayor and Council as well. On the Parksville Park Survey, we'll be completing a parks asset inventory. As well, we'll be preparing GIS layers and mapping. We have a GIS student, Stacy, who's been doing a ton of hard work. She's really great and will continue to do so. As well, we'll be completing a residents and tourist survey on-site, online, and a mail-out survey of that. And what we refer to as picnic table meetings, which are basically face-to-face interview-style meetings with different user groups throughout the parks, and mainly as well through the community park as well. So what we've completed. So we've initiated both projects. We're hitting the ground running, and we've been working for the last about a month or so away just getting this thing going. It's been really great. We've initiated the GIS mapping, so Stacy, our GIS tech, has been doing a lot of great work thus far on that. The park inventory, the ground truthing of the park inventory has been complete. There's definitely a lot of back-end work that we're still finishing up. That's well on its way. And the first public engagement activity was completed this past weekend, which Sarah will go into more detail a little bit later here. And we began drafting the Community Park Master Plan final report. Moving forward, so our first public open house and World Cafe session is scheduled for March 25th. I believe you all have chits in front of you about the event there, so we're really, really excited. It's going to be a great opportunity for everybody, staff, residents, members of the community, to come out and kind of see what we've been up to so far, give feedback, and just be involved in that regard. Release of the resident survey is scheduled for the end of this month, the beginning of April as well. So the picnic table meetings with user groups, as I introduced in the last slide, will be going on throughout March and into April. We've identified upwards of 30 user groups, and we'll be very busy over the next month or so engaging with them. And then updated attribute table for parks and trails should be completed by the end of April. So I'll pass it off to Sarah to talk about our event that happened this last Saturday, Parks on the Street Day.
Perfect. Thank you. So this past Saturday we had an event called Parks on the Street Day, where we were distributing questionnaires to residents and tourists who were coming around, just asking them very simple questions about the parks. So we ended up having 14 students come out and 2 of our professors to help distribute this survey or this questionnaire and gather data. We hope to get 100 respondents, and we ended up exceeding our expectations. So 272 people filled out this questionnaire, which was wonderful. So we had students in the community park, outside Thrifties, Quality Foods, the coffee shop, and Naked Naturals, Springwood Park, the library, and then spread throughout Parksville, just engaging with residents and people, and it was just a wonderful day. So these are the 3 questions that we asked residents and all those who took the questionnaires. And then we ended up splitting this into themes. These aren't conclusive, but they will help us to further our research, and they'll become the table topics when we do the World Cafe and also be part of the survey that we sent out. So the first question was, what aspects of Parksville City Parks do you appreciate? And this is what people came up with. These were the general trends. So accessibility, infrastructure, aesthetics, the wildlife in particular, the amenities, the beautiful new washroom at the community park, which just went in last year, I believe, and it's gorgeous. And then services, security, people feel really safe at the parks, or in the parks. And then activities, sports, entertainment, and events. And we all know that there are amazing events that go on in Parksville. And then location. So parks are spread all throughout Parksville, and people really appreciate that. And then when we were looking at the next 2 questions, we ended up having to group them together because the answers were coming back, and they were kind of melding into one another. So what do you believe is currently missing from Parksville City Parks, and what changes would you like to see occur in Parksville City Parks? And it's interesting, if you look at these answers, there's a lot of crossover between what people appreciate and also what people want to see or what they feel is missing. So accessibility, wheelchairs, people with strollers, people who are having a difficult time. And when we were looking at these questionnaires, we were asking about all of the parks in particular, but most of the questionnaires were coming back, or the answers we were receiving were specifically about the community park. So that was interesting to note. And then also the aesthetics, wildlife, and access to nature. People felt that they could be connected more even. And then park amenities and services, and we split that into services and activities. And then dogs. There were definitely people on both sides of the fence with dogs on leash versus off leash and stuff. But again, this isn't conclusive. They'll just be used to guide further analysis. And then, again, just restating what Devan said, this is a wonderful opportunity, and we really appreciate it, and we look forward to continue our work with you. So thank you.
Well, thanks very much. Members of council, any questions for the VIU students? Can we get a copy of the report? Are we going to automatically get a copy of that? Okay, great. Since nobody else has a question, we have you brought this evening, and I think we have other cards, Mrs. Tardif. We have cards like this. So if anybody in the audience, they're available at the table, and we'll have some here at City Hall for people. This is a reminder for the 25th, and that's going to be an interesting project. Oh, you have a question? Yeah. Good. I'm glad somebody's got a question, not only me.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the presentation. It really is very exciting to have you here conducting this survey and the public engagement events. Now, I understand the March 25th, that is the next opportunity that comes up. Is that correct? But you mentioned that there were several looking ahead. Do you have dates for the other ones available as of yet?
So we're still, Devan, well, the whole team is working together, coming up with the next date, but there will be another one in May. Mm-hmm.
I think that's just really great. I know that myself, I have a bit of a challenge for the 25th, but I don't want to miss an opportunity to see the work you're doing.
Sure, thank you. And the other thing to note is we will be in the parks all summer, so there will be opportunities throughout the summer to engage with students. That's good. Well, thank you.
Could you go back just to the earlier slide, the first earlier slide? When you talk about park, talking about park services, was there any elaboration on the type of services?
Yes, Janet, did you have, sorry, was this services? The missing ones. Sorry.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. And so are you talking to the Chamber of Commerce as well as the Downtown Business Association as user groups? Are those part of the discussions?
Yes, we'll be in contact with them for sure.
Okay, and are you aware, and I might be stepping on toes, but there's the youth ambassador programs that are in the parks through the summer in downtown. Will there be some kind of communication between the two of you, or do you know that? The two groups?
We haven't looked into it, but now that we
Okay.
know, we will for sure. Youth ambassadors?
They're youth ambassadors
okay.
through the Parksville Downtown Business Association.
Okay.
And they're down there a lot and up here at the businesses, and they collect a bunch of information.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
When you contact the Parksville Downtown Business Association, if you talk to the executive director, Pam Bottomley, she's here this evening. She can fill you in with all sorts of information for the past 2 summers.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Any further questions from members of council? Well, thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you again. And good hunting. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's hunting for information. Okay, our next presentation, we have 3 delegations this evening. The first delegation is the Perfect Storm Group, and we have Dr. Mark Morris, who's going to review the Oceanside issues regarding recruitment and retention of family physicians, and we have Mr. Tom Davies from the Fora Group, who's been quarterbacking this thing on behalf of everybody. I'm not used to seeing the both of you, and I only see you at 7 o'clock in the morning once a month, and it's really odd to see you at 6 o'clock at night. So who's on first? Dr. Morris? Welcome. You want to just turn the that's it.
Thank you for having us, Mayor and Council. This is not my usual voice. I'm just getting over a cold, so I do apologize. And Tom will do more talking today than anticipated. So I'm here today representing the Perfect Storm Group, which is really a group that's dedicated to recruitment and retention of primary care practitioners in Oceanside. Now for today, I know it's a very short presentation. Usually I've got about an hour, so I'm going to try and boil down the essentials, talk a bit about the formation of the Perfect Storm Group, give an update on what has taken place so far, and then talk about where do we need to go from here. So many of you are familiar with GP for Me. It was a province-wide initiative from the government of BC, Doctors of BC, Division of Family Practice, and really trying to enable patients who want a family doctor to find one. And so this was a province-wide project, and we had in Oceanside our own GP for Me. And we actually gathered a lot of information as part of that project. Now, during a mayor's breakfast, we were asked to present, and this is September 2015. We met with the mayors, Parksville, Qualicum, councillors, chambers of commerce, as well as MLA Michelle Stillwell, organized by Fora. And we're talking about primary care issues, and one of the big ones that we're having now is lack of family physicians, lack of primary care providers. So really, when we look at the state, it's really equal to a perfect storm. So we're having potential impact on community, longer wait times, clinic closures secondary to inability to find coverage for vacation and illness. We're seeing physician burnout, strain on the urgent care secondary to these issues, as well as, of course, increased unattached patients. So out of that meeting, the Perfect Storm Group was formed. And maybe I'll get Tom just to list off the names of the people that we have involved with the Perfect Storm Group.
Sure. We have the two mayors, Lefebvre and Westbrook, Bill Veenhoff, RDN Chair, Chambers of Commerce, Island Health, Michelle Stillwell, Don Hubbard has attended our meeting as Chair of Island Health, for a group, of course, and the Chambers of Commerce. Big participation by Alderman Burden or Councillor Burden, and those are the primary folks. Those are the people in what we call the main committee. We're now off into a subcommittee doing other things. But what's going to happen at some point in time, if this community, this Oceanside community, wants to have doctors, then we're going to have to think outside the box, and we're going to have to do something that is supported by the community, because there are 67 vacancies for doctors within this island right now, and everybody's competing for any doctors who are available to come here, and the only way that we're going to be able to suit our need or fill our needs on a sustainable basis is by coming up with something that will encourage new doctors and nurse practitioners and the support staff and the multidisciplinary people that would be all attached to that to come in here and stay in this community, and so that we'll have a long-term sustainable resource of medical health services, which will help this community in so many respects, economically, development, and bringing new jobs in, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and as Tom has mentioned, we're really looking at a significant number of physicians, and currently in Oceanside there's 7 positions that are open. Since July 2015, we've actually had 4 family physicians who have left family practices in Oceanside, 3 moving to larger centers and 1 changing scope of practice. We've got another physician, at least one we know of, who's retiring later on this year, and will leave another 1,000 patients unattached. And through our surveys, we know that multiple physicians are planning for retirement in the next 5 to 10 years. So this is what we're up against. On the screen, there's over 65 openings advertised for GPs on Island Health. So looking at our neighbors, 7 in Courtenay, 10 in Nanaimo. So we're actually competing against larger centers, larger communities, and it's very difficult to attract to a smaller clinic nowadays. New residents typically don't want to practice in that environment. So part of the feedback we're getting, again, barriers to Oceanside, the small clinics, there's lack of management and resources, lack of cross coverage, lack of employment for spouses, significant others. Paper-based clinics, we still have those in our Oceanside area. And older, more complex population, generally the newer grads take a bit of time before they're comfortable seeing that type of practice. And work-life balance. Who would have thought people would want that when they graduate from medical school? And of course, they're having greater debt load, so they're looking at more lucrative areas, hospitalists, ER, very rural and remote areas, which give daily minimums, which we don't have in this area. So what has taken place so far? We have an excellent recruitment video, and I would encourage everyone to watch it. Not only does it help recruit physicians, but it does promote our area. We've developed web brochures, welcome packages for new physicians. We've done multiple site visits to other clinics to review successful models. We've held community forums to discuss the issues. Meeting with local stakeholders is what we continue to do. And right now we're creating a community wish list to aid retention of current Oceanside physicians. So we don't want to lose the ones that we have now. Even though a number are getting close to retirement, we want to keep them here as long as we can. So where do we go from here? So really, we need to increase capacity. We need more physicians, more nurse practitioners. So a multi-practitioner clinic that's essentially run by the community. That way we can get physicians back to practicing medicine, nurse practitioners practicing medicine, rather than worrying about the books and the financial aspect. So this idea of a turnkey type setup. We also want to make sure it's a fair process, so physicians who are in this community don't feel like someone's coming here and getting a golden key. We want to make sure that it's fair to existing physicians. And basically, I think what we have here is excellent care. We just need more of it. So we can maybe delay retirement by enticing physicians to mentor this new group of residents because I think they have a lot to offer. Yeah, if we can keep them here and maybe even support with some nurse practitioners as well, just to help with workload. Yes. And then, as Tom mentioned, we do have a foundation which is recently formed, and we'll be able to look at taking in donations that can help with formation of this clinic and also helping with the wish list that's being devised for the local physicians.
Thank you very much. Questions from members of council? Councillor Beale and then Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation. I have had a chance to see the video that was produced, and I agree, it's absolutely delightful. I'm curious, have the efforts so far, led to some promising interest, if you like?
Well, so far we've, as I mentioned, we've lost physicians, and unfortunately we lost our two youngest physicians. I think I may be the youngest physician now, so. But we were able to secure Dr. Colin Duncan, who took over for Dr. Kevin Martin, and he was quite involved with a locum project which Shelley McNeil spearheaded. So I think by getting people here, showing them the community, we were able to attract Dr. Duncan here. So I think that's the positive. And we've had other people, other residents who have expressed interest, and we're really hoping to have a new model, a new clinic or space that we can have people come and show them this is Oceanside, team-based care, really again practicing medicine rather than business, which will leave the business up to the business experts.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have 2 or 3 questions. The daily minimum, is that if you're way out in the rural, you get an extra, you're guaranteed? Is that what that means, the daily minimum?
Yeah, essentially what ends up happening is in some places when they see a locum physician, so someone who's covering, they decide not to go and they wait until the physician gets back. So it ends up where people can have days where they're really not seeing that many. So they give them a daily minimum. And I'm not sure the exact amount, but it does kind of help just so that, again, they're not sitting around and not making any money, because a lot of us work on fee-for-service, so the busier we are, the more money we make.
And I thought I read in the paper that there was a pilot project that was going to be started in this area, and it described basically what you described as a clinic, but you didn't run the business part of it. Could you speak more about that?
Sure. And yep, that was me in the paper. And the Perfect Storm group is involved with looking at a clinic. And there hasn't been any site that's been arranged. But the idea, again, is looking at a model where it's a team-based care. And the Ministry of Health, their direction is going for more team-based care. So that's having, again, nurses involved, nurse practitioners, physicians, social workers, occupational therapists, physiotherapists. So it's really, it's a novel concept to have that team-based care, and that's the model that we're looking at putting forward. It's difficult to attract physicians without an actual space. So again, the idea behind a pilot.
Any further, before I go to Councillor Veal again, any further, Councillor Burton?
So I've had an education being part of the Perfect Storm group, but I wonder if you could share in 50 words or less the difference between the potential of having a primary care clinic and the Oceanside Health Center, which I think creates some confusion in some people's minds.
Well, I think the Oceanside Health Center does excellent work, and they've been very good for urgent care. They do have a primary care side, but unfortunately right now they don't have any physicians that are working there. So they've got some, I think, 3 nurse practitioners who provide care there, and they provide good care. What we're looking at that's different from this model is it wouldn't be Island Health owned and operated, it would be community owned and operated. So really looking at the needs of the community. Physicians who would be part of it would be there and typically giving a percentage of what they make to help with operating the clinic. Similar to what the Gabriola model. So this wouldn't be essentially a burden to taxpayers to run, but it would be where physicians would be generating the revenue and to help a sustainable model, which I think is what we need in BC. You know, just to reassure people it's not going to be taxpayer dollars going to this clinic.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just looking at an article in regards with the Practice Ready Assessment BC program, and I'm just wondering if we're looking at any of those models and that as well. And then I'll have a follow-up.
Okay, is that in regards to IMG residents? Yeah, and just one of my other titles, I'm the lead physician at the Parksville Medical Clinic, and we do have a physician working there who was from the IMG program. Unfortunately, we know from past experiences, and I think we've had, I'm trying to remember the names here, because we've got Dr. Jariman, Dr. Pilipili, Dr. Room, Dr. Amarihi. These were 4 physicians who are part of the IMG program that came to the area, did a great job while they were here, but then left. So I believe Dr. El Karsh, who's still working in Qualicum, was part of the IMG program and has stayed. So I think, yes, that program can help, but I don't think it's a long-term solution. And I think if we get physicians who are trained in the area and who are mentored, that we're going to have a better chance of holding on to them. We'll still have the international medical grads, but you know, based on prior history, it's not a long-term solution.
Thank you.
I think that the being a member of this Perfect Storm group, I think it's a great example of the whole Oceanside community working together to look for tentative and realistic solutions to the problem. But it's a really challenging problem, isn't it? We've outlined tonight that, you know, Tom, you might want to say a bit more about that.
Yeah, I'd just like to say an additional word about the foundation, because if we're going to make this work, it's going to have to be community funded, community supported. And we're in the process right now where we have a registered foundation, the Qualicum Beach Parksville Healthcare Foundation, but we do not yet have the status where we can issue tax receipts, tax donation receipts, and that's going to be very important. So this foundation will certainly be the foundation foundation of the fundraising for the community, but there's going to be other needs to that as well, because not just the money. The money's got to be there, but we also need the talent that's in this community right now to help with the ideas. What's this going to look like? What's the space, or where are we going to get the space? Who's going to be providing the land? Who's going to be what kind of a design of a building are we going to have? Who are the carpenters, the electricians, the developers who can volunteer their time as they did over in Lasqueti to not Lasqueti, over at Gabriola to donate in kind, and that's how that thing got built. The community got together, they galvanized, and they have doctors that are not turning over. And so we need to get to that point here. But let's not be mistaken about this. If in order for this community to have sustainable medical services of the kind that this community deserves, the community is going to have to roll up its sleeves and get out and participate and say, okay, we're 100% behind this, and we're going to make this work, and we're going to make it work on a sustainable basis.
Thanks very much. And I know that we'll succeed because we've got an awful lot of people that are committed to working towards this goal. So I think I see success in the future. I'm also we're going to be having a meeting later on this week, and we have a nurse practitioner making a presentation. And I was fascinated to learn. I'm learning more and more, being a member of this committee, that nurse practitioners can do almost 70% of the work of a doctor. So that's a big help too. So maybe with a mix and match of that, we should get somewhere over time. Thanks very much again. And you know, it's unfortunate, Dr. Morris, there's no cure for the common cold. I had to get that in there. That's what my doctor told me. The next delegation is the Oceanside Community Safety Speed Watch program. We have Michael Garland. Michael, have you got anybody else with you tonight, or are you all by yourself? Okay, well, thanks for coming. And you're going to give us a presentation on how the program can reduce speeds in municipalities through monitoring and education. And I'm sure that members of council are going to have some suggestions for you tonight on where you might do some of that speed monitoring.
Well, thank you very much, Your Worship and Council. Yes, the main reason that Oceanside Community Safety is here is that there was a discussion in this very chamber in January, and the discussion was around speeders in the community. Now, I'm not saying that we have the perfect solution, but we have perhaps some tools that may be able to help us out a wee bit. So we offer a program which is basically a citizens program. Residents of Parksville getting together and helping monitor the streets. So basically, Speed Watch is a group of citizens, no special talents. In fact, we actually know that because in our volunteer group, we actually have the mayor of Qualicum Beach is one of our volunteers. So obviously, we take people from all different broads of the brush here, and we look forward to the opportunity of working with all of our citizens to make this a good program. I live just over on Hickey Avenue. And by the way, for those that are wondering, Speedwatch is not a vigilante group. Basically, based upon an old premise. That premise was by Sir Robert Peel. How many of you were around in 1829? Okay, you missed it. Anyway, Sir Robert Peel, he was the gentleman charged with forming the first municipal police force in the United Kingdom. And one of the statements he made was very important. The police are the public, and the public are the police. So issues such as people speeding is something that we as a community have to address, not just those folks that we pay to enforce the Motor Vehicle Act. So what is Speedwatch? How does it kind of work? Basically, we set up monitors. So we monitor locations along a roadway, and even better than that, we help motorists. So for how many of you folks drive a car? I just want to see, honestly, this is an honest question. Okay, good. In front of the steering wheel, there's a device called a speedometer. It's one of those hidden devices, much like the turn indicator. By the way, most of those cars have that as well. So basically, what we do at the roadside is we put up an additional monitor to help you gauge your speed, because sometimes we forget about that. So what Speed Watch is education. We're here to remind you this is a safe speed that you should be traveling in this neck of the woods. And you have to realize that for us, it's all about safety as well. So it's about setting up a board and monitoring it. It's a little bit different than putting a permanent structure up because it's ever-changing, and people get nervous. How often do we go through our own street and we kind of look, but we never see? Speedwatch provides the seeing. Suddenly, someone's looking back at you. So now you have to pay a bit more attention. So does it actually help? Or are you distracted because someone's standing by the roadside? Research has shown that over 70% of drivers exceeding the speed limit will slow down with the ever so gentle reminder of people by the roadside. And when I say people by the roadside, the actual signboard is the item that is actually doing the educating. Our volunteers do not wave their hands, do not wave their fists, do not swear, don't do the finger wave. And that's, again, we're not enforcement, we're education. We're that gentle nurturing type that want to be out there to help you get to your destination. Okay, what are the dangers of speeding? Actually, for those around here in council chambers and councillors and your worship, speeding actually isn't a problem. The actual problem is stopping. And for those of us who have experienced this past winter, shudder, you realize that even though you have all-wheel drive and you can drive really fast, you cannot defeat the laws of physics. All-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, you can't stop any sooner than any other vehicle on the road. Sorry, folks, it's about physics. So the whole idea of Speed Watch is the dangers of speeding. But in reality, we're trying to tell you, please, slow down. Hence the reason why in a school zone, it's 30. We have children who may not know the rules of the road. So it's very important that we monitor it to make sure that folks are well aware of what the real rules are of the road. And how do we accomplish that? Not with a computer, apparently. So basically, we are looking for residents. We hope that they are of good character. The RCMP asks us to do that. Just off to your left for the members of council and for the audience here, on your right-hand side are some of the tools of the trade. So we have everything from a speed reader unit, we have a display board, speed signs, cones, and a lovely, and I say very attractive, high-vis vest for safety, and a clipboard. And that little piece of stuff, which is I'm keeping an eye on, is because it's worth a little over $5,000. Hence the reason why that, even if you're interested, we do need to do a bit of a security check on you. As well, you are officially representing the RCMP as ears and eyes. And so it's very important that you keep yourself in the proper vein. That didn't work the way it was supposed to work. Just bear with me. Talk among yourselves at this point. Here comes help. See, if Corporal Foreman here would have been a lot easier. So, thank you very much. Well done. Thank you, Blaine. So, moving along, there's the equipment. So the equipment does the actual educating. What we need, though, are people to look after that equipment. And thank you to the City of Parksville. We have access 24/7 to our equipment, which is stored in the community center, and allows our volunteers, no matter what time, what their schedule is, they can make arrangements to grab the equipment and have it placed on a roadside. Most roadsides are anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours, but if you have a cup of coffee and a friend that wants to sit with you for like hours on end, we have the solution for you. And what time of day do you go out? Well, according to the school district, it should be at about 8 o'clock until about probably 5:15. That's when they really need it. If I talk to my good friends down at the lounge and the beach, those are local radio stations, by the way, we actually did a setup outside their studios, and they were saying it's crazy, like starting about 6 o'clock in the morning. So as long as it's light, it's safe for our volunteers to get out, and we certainly can do that. And by the way, for those that want to join so they have the opportunity of writing tickets, no, you cannot write tickets. I'm sorry, that's not within our domain. So, what has gone on so far since January? As I alluded to, with the radio stations, we're able to put together a campaign in front of the station. And in fact, Bill Dean, who is the DJ of the lounge in the morning, yes, that easy listening music, he was absolutely amazed. He actually saw our top speed of the morning, which was 76 in the 50 zone. Yes, 19A is the 50 zone for those of you who don't know where the radio station is. So it's important, again, for us to be vigilant, to be out there, get out there and help. And I also want to make right now publicly note from Mike Squire's group, John Diggins. He actually approached us asking us, what else can we do? And we are now employing the message board. And for those, how many of you have traveled 4A last week toward Coombs? Oh, come on, somebody must have went. Thank you. Did you notice a little sign? Maximum 50. Danger, high crash zone. One of the things in Parksville I'm not as proud of, we had the highest crash location in Oceanside. Yes, Inland Highway 19 and 4A. That is the biggie. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're inviting the people in the gallery. Actually, yes, Teresa, you keep looking, but I know you work a lot of hours, as does most members of council. I invite all of you, if you'd like to participate, a chance for you to be a part of the solution. And without all of our residents getting involved, this is not a Pym Street, this is not a Molliette Street problem, this is a Parksville problem. And this is something we all can get behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure members of council, not surprised, Councillor Burton has his hand up first.
As you know, I've been very concerned about this issue for a long time, and I would welcome you to come and set up in my driveway on the Hearst Speedway anytime you like.
Any further comments, Councillor? Oh.
Yeah, thank you for what you do. Really appreciate it, and it's very effective. How do you make your determinations as to where you set up and when you do it?
Well, actually, what it is based on a number of factors. For those that may not be familiar, we do have an office, or we call it the fishbowl, in City Hall here, which actually is very effective. People do come in and they raise concerns. We do track those concerns, and we pass along to our lead, who looks after Speed Watch. Most of the leads we get are from the RCMP. The front desk, they get a whole plethora of people that want to basically have enforcement. One of the frustrating things for the RCMP, and now that Corporal Foreman's not here, I can speak to it, is that people will say, at 7:30 every morning, this white truck goes by. And the first question I always think is, okay, if you know it's 7:30 every morning, why wouldn't you get the license plate instead of saying, well, maybe somebody can do something about it? We got to take, some sort of an effort to be a part of it. So to that part, we also put in the PQB News. By the way, this is the only color paper I could find. And basically, it's an ad, asking people, hey, what can we do for you? How would you like to get involved? So we do a lot of advertising the PQB News. We have this lovely and delightful threefold, trifold in front of our office. We invite people to take it. And just so that you're not thrown to the wolves, we actually have training guides for people that would like to get involved. And one of the things with these booklets is that March the 25th, knowing that I was going to be here, and if I didn't have an answer, someone would ask anyway. So March the 25th, 10 a.m., the Parksville Community Center in the COP Emergency Services offices, we will do a training session. It's 2 hours. Sadly, you will be listening to me. Fortunately, it's only for 45 minutes because the next part is we actually do the practical. So we actually set up. You learn how to be safe at a roadside. You learn how to take notes, and you learn how to participate and be an active member of our community.
Do you actually take down license plate numbers if somebody's going 76, 80 kilometers an hour in a 50 kilometer zone?
Your Worship, We try to. And to that end, for those not familiar with our processes, we always phone into RCMP dispatch. We actually have a backdoor number, which I can't tell you. You will have to join us to get that number. That being said, we do, when we see are able to, we will take down license plate. And there was one instance, actually, earlier this year, where a motorist went by us twice, 20 kilometers over the speed limit. So we get on our phones, we phone dispatch, hey, we got an issue here. A member was nearby, responded. Came, spoke to us, don't worry, we'll eventually catch him. The Mountie just went up the road a wee bit and just stopped. Didn't the guy come through a third time? And it gets better. Mountie pulls him over, gives him the ticket. The guy starts complaining. He says, the only reason you pulled me over is I'm driving a red car. And the Mountie said, well, not really, sir. It's the third time you've been doing this, and third time is not the charm.
Councillor Salter.
So I'm just wondering, do you get numbers? So if you're in a particular area that you think might be a high speed zone, do you get numbers with, regarding how many people are speeding in that area during a particular time frame?
Your Worship, yes, indeed, Council, we do keep those statistics. Ironically, I mentioned about the fishbowl. Those statistics are actually posted in our office. And it gives you how many vehicles. On average, we do about 7,000 to 8,000 vehicles a month. And each time out, because you'd be surprised, 4A highway leading past Buckerfields, the healthcare center, at that time, we will easily get 1,200 cars, 1,400 cars in 90 minutes. And by the way, that's off-season. We're hard-pressed to keep up to the numbers during the summertime. But that's where the education comes in, and that's why it's important. We actually have 4 reader boards available to be deployed at any one time. However, until cloning becomes perfected, and I get more hours in my day, we do need some help. And we need everyone involved and has an issue to step up.
Yes, thank you for that. And so if you have the numbers and you would know that where there was a high-speed area, I know that 4A and 19 wouldn't work, but the side streets, do you think that putting in speed bumps would, like, have you noticed a change in any areas where speed bumps have been installed?
I'm afraid I'm not up on traffic calming measures, and I believe that to the experts. I do know that when we do employ, in this particular case, reader boards to remind people, they are effective. What you don't want is you want to have something that's ever-changing, and it goes back to that familiarity. So has there been a difference? If you talk to residents, they have noticed differences, but unfortunately, habits grow again, and unless you go back there often, people tendency to go back. And there's a couple of points that we really try to address. And if you go to the ICBC website, there actually is a list of all the crash locations. And it does define Oceanside, and it defines Parksville specifically, and you can identify all those areas. We try to identify those where fatalities occur, and that's kind of the dead end sign, and we're trying to prevent that. So the more people we get out, the more signage we get out, the new basically information boards, message boards that we can deploy, they all help. So I believe one of the things that came out there is only one RCMP member who is assigned to what they call municipal traffic. So for those of you not familiar, municipal traffic is those that are not a provincial highway. So 19, 19A, there are RCMP members, 8, that are actually in charge of that. But within the city of Parksville, there is one. And by the way, he is responsible from Nanoose to Deep Bay, for people who don't know where Deep Bay is, Bowser, north of Bowser, or Cathedral Grove. Thank God there's no cars in Lasqueti, because he'd be responsible for that too. So that is a major issue for the RCMP. The members that are on general duty, on the watch, they usually have to respond to service calls for service, and they're not necessarily always available.
Go to Councillor. Have you spoken yet? Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Patterson, then I'm going to go to you.
Thank you so much for coming forward, not today, so I have a couple little brief questions. How long have you been with this organization?
This is almost up there with, how old are you? Well, I have been a proud member of Oceanside, Parksville specifically, since 2012. Previously, I spent 20 years as a volunteer with the Calgary Police Service, and this is my opportunity of contributing to my new community. So I've been involved with this program for over 4 years.
Fabulous. So you weren't a radio announcer in your past life?
Well, I don't think so.
Can you tell us all and those who are watching and that how many volunteers that you have in right now?
Well, you know what? It's Oceanside Community Safety used to go by a couple of different names, and we were under an umbrella now. We used to be known as Citizens on Patrol Society. We used to be known as Community Policing. We used to be known as Speedwatch. So we're basically an amalgamated organization. We offer all of those programs, and we have over 100 volunteers, but they're spread over the entire Oceanside area. So I'm not going to do a plug for Blockwatch. However, I just happen to have the brochure here. So I basically look at Speedwatch as being a block watch on wheels. So same idea, ears and eyes.
And then my last question, you said that you had 4 message boards?
We have 4 radar laser units.
Okay.
And in fact, that's one of the great things about coming to our course. I'll teach you the difference between laser and radar guns. So we do have we have 4 speed reader boards available, 2 in Parksville and 2 in that other smaller community next to us, Qualicca Beach. But we can always get those boards for us, though. We can always use those boards.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming.
Councillor Beale and then Councillor Burden.
I would just like to say thank you very much. It's been really informative and also quite entertaining, and a great plug for volunteers, and I think it also doesn't sound perhaps as intimidating to step up to take part. And as a friend and neighbor of mine would say, you know, you're either part of the solution, you know, if you're be part of the solution, right? So I think all together we all contribute to make our communities either a safer, better place or not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Burden.
I want to follow up on the questions that Councillor Salter asked. You see 1,200 vehicles in a 90-minute time frame on 4A outside of Buckerfields. What percentage of those are exceeding the speed limit?
Well, okay, I guess I'm going to use generalities here only because you got to realize when we do the actual recording, we do in increments of 10. Sadly, we do a lot. I would say easily 70% exceed what the board will tell you is the maximum speed limit. Most Mounties, oh, this is recorded. Anyway, I'm not going to tell any secrets here, but because of court cases, there is a gray area, and no, it's not 10 kilometers an hour, by the way. But there is a gray area. 70% of motorists will be exceeding. What we look at as our success ratio is when we're looking at the board. And again, I want to emphasize, the volunteers aren't out there slowing traffic down. It's the board. We keep them safe to the side, out of the way. What we look at is we watch the high speed that may be coming at us at 65, and you see it start slowing down, then we know we've done our job. That way you can see, and that's one of the instantaneous gratifications you get, unlike doing things such as Citizens on Patrol, where you may not see if you're doing anything well in the community. But with the speed board, you actually see. And unfortunately and sadly, often we get some that are 30 kilometers, and this goes back to His Worship's comment. Anything 40 kilometers or over, we desperately try to get the plate because that's considered dangerous driving, which means the vehicle could be impounded.
Okay, there's a permanent speed reader board on Highway 19. It's the last exit into Lantzville. And I've noticed when I'm coming back to Parksville from Nanaimo, that when people see that speed reader board and they look at the speed that they're going, you can see people putting their brakes on to slow down. What about a permanent speed reader board? Would there be such a thing as a permanent speed reader board that would give you these stats? on a regular basis?
Actually, I believe there is one on Despard already. I don't know if they've got it wired or have the software to do it. We actually could go to the next generation. The speed reader boards you're looking behind me here are vintage 1990s. Up until my wife reminded me that is a long time ago now in comparison. So the equipment is getting mature. We have a new laser board that can actually, with a laptop, take all that information. We didn't even need a volunteer out there other than we want to make sure nobody runs over or steals our $5,000 board.
My last question is, could you get a speed reader board when you have somebody's coming at a high speed, take a picture of the license plate so that you could get that down in terms of the human eye being able to do that at the same time? It's not. I'm not talking about speeders radar. I'm talking about a piece of equipment that would take the photograph.
Your Worship, this is a bit of a tricky area for us as volunteers. The RCMP don't want us to have video recording equipment, and it all goes back to privacy. We have to, the Charter of Rights takes precedent over it. We do the best that we can. I wish I could say covertly, I personally would love to be able to do it, but unfortunately I do have to follow the RCMP guidelines, and at this point in time, they will not allow us to do videoing of traffic as it comes toward us.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions for Mr. Garland? We'll make this the last question, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. I used to work at Family Place where they have that four-way stop. Nobody ever stopped there. Do you have a board that actually says, stop, go? Because it's terrible. There's little kids there. It's a busy street. And it's like, people didn't even slow down most of the time.
Council, if I may address that, it's ironic sometimes they do slow down because once a month, one of our programs is child car seat safety. We actually park the police vehicle there. Suddenly that stop sign is immensely popular again. People recognize it. But again, Speed Watch is monitoring the speed. We don't have jurisdiction. Again, we are not enforcement. We're education.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks to you and all of your volunteers for the good work that you do. Keep it up. And come back and see us again sometime with some more information.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Next delegation is from the Pioneer Crescent Neighborhood Residents Association with a request for support of Shelley Park Improvement Project. So I have Don Harper and Doug Hirschmer. Did I pronounce your name properly? Hirschmer? Herkmer. Oh, yeah, that's right, Herkmer. That sounds better. So welcome, gentlemen, and you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, Council and staff and fellow guests. My name is Doug Herkmer. I'm the outgoing president of the Pioneer Crescent Neighborhood Residents Association, and I'm here with Don Harper, who's the existing president of the Bard to Broadway Society. Together we have formed an alliance called the Shelley Park Improvement Project Steering Committee. And tonight we're here to provide some information, answer questions, and gain council support and approval for our initiative. I'll just show you, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Shelley Park. It's 186 Shelley Road.
It's 3 hours there once a year.
Okay, so this is what we're talking about. I think there was some information passed out about Shelley Park, so I won't go through the whole presentation, but this is the former public works yard for the city of Parksville. Prior to the late 1990s, it was decommissioned around 1998 or 2000. Initially, it was operated by the Kinsmen and rented out for meetings to local clubs and groups. And around 2008, it was taken over by the Bard to Broadway Theatre Society. They assumed an operating agreement with the city. And in 2012, they entered into a 5-year lease with the city and operate it under a management agreement. Expires in June of this year. The Pioneer Crescent Neighborhood Residents Association approached the city in the fall of 2013 asking for Shelley, it was formerly called Shelley Hall. We asked for it to be designated as a park, and it was approved and designated as a park by council in November 2013. We then approached the city, Mike Squire, and asked for the city to develop it as a park. And it's actually sort of in limbo. It was supposed to be put into the parks budget for 2016 to 2020. And in the meantime, our association approached McDonald Gray Landscape Architects, and we had Nigel Gray and Kara McDonald develop a concept plan for this area, and they're here tonight to answer any questions if there's any specific questions on the concept plan. I just want to quickly jump over to an overview of the plan. That's what I was. So this is just an overview of the concept plan. It's in draft format right now. There's still some tweaking that needs to be done. But basically, yeah, that's better, thank you. Key features include park benches that can be added, picnic tables, a pathway, a designated pathway, garbage cans, a trash enclosure. Like, none of this is in place right now. This is the existing building. This is sort of a concrete slab that we developed a number of years ago as a basketball court, but it's used for parking. And this is the actual parking area right here. So our plan is to develop this into an actual functional park in our neighborhood. And we would develop a child's play area in this particular area here. We would put in proper irrigation and proper landscaping as well. So this concept plan it was estimated to cost approximately $45,000. This is just an overview of some of the costs involved. So landscaping, irrigation, site furnishings, those sort of things. So our concept right now, or our plan is jointly go forward as a partnership with the Bard to Broadway Society and the Pioneer Crescent Neighborhood Residents Association to actually go out and raise the funds. The Bard to Broadway Society is a registered charity, can issue tax receipts, And so we're planning to launch a major fundraising initiative once we get the green light from the city. We're not asking the city for funding, we're just asking for support and approval to go forward. I'll just quickly show a few more pictures of the area. So right now it's pretty barren. There's a few trees there. The Bard to Broadway Society gets funding from the city on an annual basis and keeps the yard and grounds maintained. They have an agreement with a couple that actually manage the facility and rent it out. It's used almost every night for meetings by clubs and organizations. We held a social last fall in September on this property, and just for the neighborhood. We had over 60 people show up, and there was overwhelming support for moving forward on this initiative. We had people that wanted to give us funding right then and there on the spot, but we just weren't set up for that at the time. I'll just show one last photo. And then if you have any questions, I'd be pleased to entertain them.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks very much for your good work. Questions, Councillor Salter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. I just have a couple. What is, I don't see any washrooms there.
They're inside the building.
So the building, is it open all the time?
Or? No, you have to get a key for it. You have to basically, if you want to use the building, you have to approach the couple that manage it. You're basically going to be renting a room. So it's not open to the public at the moment. It's open as to rent a room.
Well, I'm just wondering if it's a community park and then people are there from the community and they have to use the washroom, then what would they do? Because I'm sort of thinking, well, this is similar to Foster Park then, but
That's right.
They have washrooms there.
Well, it's something that could be considered, but I think putting in washrooms are prohibitively expensive, and then they're difficult to maintain. So I'm not sure. I mean, we could take it under consideration, but I don't know. Do you have anything, Don, you want to?
Just maybe to reiterate, whenever any user wants the facility, they can make arrangements for that, and certainly the washrooms would be available to people that are there. But on an ongoing basis, open to the public, that would be too. There's a lot of valuable equipment within the building. It wouldn't be possible to leave it open on an ongoing basis.
Well, thank you very much.
I'm going to ask Councillor Beale at this point in time to talk a little more. You're familiar with the park, so maybe you could tell us it's near where you live.
Yeah, it's not too. I'm sort of halfway between the community park and this park, but my understanding and knowing this area is that this is a fairly small neighborhood park, so it's not exact. It's not like the community park and that. I'm thinking about other parks, like whether it be Nichols Park, not too far from Bolinas, or up at Hamilton Park, that it would be primarily used by the neighborhood as well as those who are using the center. So I don't think it was, for those reasons, I'm thinking that there was no anticipation of expanding washrooms, but having something so that the neighborhood could access, that's correct, is it not?
I think that's the understanding.
Yeah. Can I add? So from the pictures you've shown, are there any benches or any picnic tables there now?
There's nothing there now.
So, and is the idea that all of this would be, so you're saying that the neighborhood would be funding this, would be working with Bard to Broadway, and how would it actually be realized? is there some thought about how, or if you could explain what the thought around realizing it when and if there's a green light or approval, and what that process would be?
Well, if we get approval from council and the city to move forward, we would initiate fundraising and with the goal of eventually raising the $40,000 to $45,000 required, but we would develop it over in stages. So we would start putting in some of the facilities, maybe a park bench, some picnic tables. The major cost is the children's play area. It's $25,000. So that would be a pretty big ticket item. Our goal is to raise the $45,000 by August of next year. So we haven't started yet, but our intention is to seek corporate sponsorship, go to foundations. There's all sorts of community groups that we would approach.
You've done great work up until now, and I'm going to make a recommendation, because we could talk about this all night in terms of what goes where, but in order to get this thing moving, I wonder if I could get a recommendation from council that these gentlemen representing this park project talk to our staff and have staff come back and give us some recommendation, because I see you met with Mr. Squire, and Mr. Squire advised you that we're looking at the Parks Capital Plan, and so maybe we could move that a little forward. Councillor Burton, I don't want to debate the design of the park tonight.
Yeah, I think the design of the park is great. I'm really pleased to hear that you're prepared to go out and do the fundraising initiative and work along those lines. Do we need you've talked to Mr. Squire already. Can we not maybe skip a step and move forward with some side of support? I think Mr. Squire wants to make a comment. Sorry.
Yes, if I may, Your Worship. As previously discussed, the plan with the Pioneer Residents Association, the plan is, as expressed to them, is firstly to update our overall city parks and trails plan in conjunction with the acquired Shelley Park. It wasn't part of the previous plan, so in recognition of all our other demands and needs throughout the community, like the newly acquired Cedar Ridge Park, Foster Park, obviously have a very active residents association with that, and Mark's Nature Park, to look at the overall city, including the Shelley Creek, which would be an update to the overall plan, and that's part of the work that we're looking at as well. And
Councilor
then
Burton.
Go out and get public input in regards to that.
Okay, and I guess I just had one other question, and that's with regard to maintenance ongoing. How does that factor in, and has there been any costing around that?
Sorry, through your worship, nothing as of yet until we actually get input from the community, the Parks and Trails plan, and determine what level of service it is needed, and then we'll have the full operation costs.
And while we have the community, the Parks Master Plan group with us, has this been included in your consultations and in your planning process? Great, thank you.
Pardon me? Okay, so who's next? Okay, let's move along here, because I think we should come to the conclusion that we want to make these people work with our staff. Councillor Patterson. Councillor Salter. Councillor Powell, then Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I'll write it down for you now. So there's a couple things. One, it sounds like, I understand it's going to be the capital works for the parks plan that we're waiting for. But in the meantime, could this group start the beginning of it, or do they have to wait until, Because it sounds like it's not going to cost the city. And if they consulted with you, like to put in the park benches, you said you're going to start slow. Would that be a possibility, or do we have to? It would be nice to have it to start to improve along the way instead of having to wait. Like, I don't know if that's possible.
That was our intention, to start slowly.
Councillor Salter, we'll wait for Mr. Squire a moment. Go ahead.
Well, actually, that was what I was going to say as well, was that they have already laid out what they want to do. They're going out there. They're getting donations in order to pay for it. I'm not exactly sure what it is. The city, I know that we need to take a look at it, but financially, why would it be in the capital plan unless we're maintaining it? And if we are, it's even going to be, it's still not going to be costly for us to get to this place. So I'm of the same mind. I'm not sure why they can't get started. I'm not sure what the holdup would be for them to at least get started if they're using their own dollars to get moving on it, and they can speak to Mr. Squire and discuss the plan. And
thank you, Mr. Squire. Would that be a problem if they started with?
It's certainly an issue. Through your worship, it's certainly at council's discretion to make that decision right now. Again, with it's being a community and parks as part of it, this being potentially a neighborhood park, and the concept of it should get community input, and that's the process essentially that we're following this year in this budget. It's certainly at council's discretion if they want to include some capital works. You will encumber some operating costs right now, which this current budget does not allow for, but if that is to happen, then those expenses will be incurred, I guess, for next 2018 budget going forward.
Councillor Beale first, and then Councillor Burton. Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. From a previous conversation that I did have with Mr. Harper, he explained that he had met also with our CAO, who's not here tonight, but to find out what particular concerns might be expressed by the city, and so including making sure that any work that's done would meet WorkSafe BC, that everything would be up to acceptable standards. And as I recall, and you can tell me if my quote is off a little bit, but that the goal was to work cooperatively with the city in such a way to minimize staff time and expense. So my understanding was that this would not necessarily cost the city anything, and that presently Bard to Broadway, having the lease, if you like, for the area actually looks after maintenance. So I'm not sure where the cost part would come in as an issue.
Councillor Burton.
So that's my only question, I guess, is the maintenance side of things. Does Bard to Broadway look after the maintenance of the park currently?
With the current management agreement that we have with the city, it explicitly gives us the responsibility of maintenance of the building and the grounds. And with the improvements, that's why we've been involved in discussing with them. Certainly we would be prepared to continue on that same principle. With the same agreement, the maintenance of the grounds would be part of the operating agreement with us.
And do you foresee the maintenance costs increasing, and do you have the revenue from the rental of the building to cover the maintenance costs if they do increase?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Patterson and Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to the staff that will be able to answer this. Their operating agreement, I believe, expires this year, and that predominantly has to be in effect prior to any of this conversation taking place. No offense or anything, but it does. And I understand the need and everything to put this with our parks plans and everything as well. But ultimately, I'd like to see a recommendation today that these two groups work with city staff and come back to us, and city staff come back to us. So I'd like to put that forward now, making a motion.
Thank you. Councillor Oates? Go ahead.
That would have been what I would have done, would refer to staff for comment with some direction. I'll speak to that, I guess, if I'm going to speak in favor of the motion. I certainly think we should be supportive of any community initiatives to improve their neighborhoods and that. And I think that we should remove any barriers to anybody that wants to do that. We need to also maintain the standards that the city has with their parks and the amenities that would be thus created and problems that may come from the creation of those amenities. So I think the right thing to do now is to have the groups, like Councillor Patterson suggested, have them work with our staff. I think our staff are well aware of what the council's standard is and how we would like to see things done, and see if we can come to some sort of middle ground or some sort of agreement to make this happen. I doubt very much that we'll get away from maintaining the park once it's completed. I'm pretty sure that this will mean that we inherit the maintenance of the park.
That's my concern.
Yeah, well, I don't think that there's any doubt about that. I think it's a bargaining unit issue, quite frankly, and the city will have to make, if we're going to be putting all these improvements in here to the park there, it'll have to be maintained just the same way as all the other parks are done, and I don't think we have the ability to go cutting special deals with different groups and with respect to the maintenance of our parks, and I think we're going to run into all kinds of problems. But I do believe that there are less obstacles here than there are opportunities, and I believe we can do something, and so what I'd like to see, is an accounting of how many, how much, how often, that sort of thing. What can we do, and hopefully we can make it work. I certainly would be in support of something that fits everybody's criteria and improves the parkland down there. And I applaud you folks for taking the initiative to come forward. If that's indicative of support from council, I think that should be reassuring to you that we want our staff to work with you.
Councillor Patterson, would you like to make that motion again? I didn't hear that as a motion, but I'll entertain it because I know you've got a seconder.
Thank you, Your Worship. My motion would entail that these two groups work with city staff in regards to the concept plan and moving forward. At that time, I think that they could probably bring back the 5-year agreement at the same time. So at the earliest convenience. And I don't know if I need to have any budgeting or cost analysis or anything in there, but if staff could come back with recommendations.
You got that, Mrs. Keller? Okay, we got a seconder in Councillor Oates. Councillor Oates, you're seconding that motion?
No, Councillor Burton seconded, but it's fine.
Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I mentioned, I'm just looking to make sure that you do have a new operating agreement in effect as well. But when you're looking at your concept plan and everything as well, I'm assuming that you're going to be going out door knocking and going to the Pioneer residents and making sure that this is kind of what they're looking for, like this initial concept. I don't know how many young families are in the area that a play structure is in your best interest. I don't know what you may foresee going forward for outdoor events or the Residents Association having a barbecue and how you may plan to schedule that, or there are a number of things that I just want you to think about as well. Thank you.
We did host a barbecue social last fall, and we did get quite a bit of support from the neighborhood, and there was support for we had a large-scale blow-up of our concept plan, which I forgot to bring tonight. But
that's all right. We have one, so
Yeah,
it's
there was
fairly-
support for the children's playground. I don't know how many families there are, but there are families in the area, and there's families moving in. So I think, you know, it's one of those things.
That's your biggest cost
yeah,
line
for sure.
item, so. Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Councillor Beal, quickly.
Yes, I was just concerned about a time frame in there. There isn't a time frame that's mentioned in the motion, and I think that for the organizers, they would need that. Would the end of April be a reasonable time frame to have the opportunity to meet and work and come back to council?
I saw you wanted it completed by 2018.
Yes.
Your Worship,
Going forward.
Yes, but I believe the plan was to meet with the neighborhood as well again and get going on fundraising. So that was my
Yeah,
question,
the
was
sooner-
what
the
time
sooner the
frame do
better.
we have?
Councillor Oates, then.
Yeah, I'll be quick. That's to Councillor Patterson's point and then Councillor Beal's point as well about engagement. That's what I envisioned would happen. That would be the role of staff, would be saying to you, look, what council's going to require. Do you need this done? Do you need that done? And that sort of thing, the logistic things. Dot all the I's and cross all the T's, if you will. The outline of the park there, the minutia of where the benches are going to go and whether they're going to face this way or that way, I'm not sure that that's going to be beneficial for us to even contemplate tonight, because that may change a dozen times before the shovel hits the ground. I do think, though, that we could indicate some level of support for the notion of the community fundraising for the improvements to the park. But there's a lot of caveats that council would have, and that would be the things that I would envision staff bringing to the table when they talk to you. You know, council's going to require that you have public meetings. They're going to require this. They're going to require that, right? And they'll give you a laundry list of barriers, and then you come back to us and we take them away.
Councillor Burton. I think that, you know, to sum up what I'm hearing tonight is that we don't want to design the park. We don't want to get into all the details tonight. We'd be here till midnight. But meeting with staff and getting going with it, I'm sure that you can contact Mr. Squire at any point in time, and then work out a plan, and then, you know, start your fundraising. And you don't have to come back to council for a while. You can start some of the simpler things you can do as soon as you're ready to go and as soon as you've got the money. But I think that we'll hold staff to come back to us from time to time, and yourself whenever you feel ready for going a bit further, or if you run into some snags, as Councillor Oates has said, if you get the laundry list gets too long, we'll come on back and we'll have a look at it again. But I'm convinced that working with staff, this will all pan out.
Yeah, we have no problem with working with the city staff. We just want to get a green light from council, from mayor and council, to go ahead with this initiative, to start fundraising. It's going to take a while. This isn't going to happen overnight.
I think you've got that tonight. So I'm going to call the vote on that motion unless somebody else has any other questions. So all those in favor of the motion, all opposed? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. So
thank you.
Good luck. We'll hear from you again sometime. We have two pieces of correspondence tonight. The first one is a request for a rental of community park hovercraft pad. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the correspondence. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Burton. I just want to point out to council that we're going to be doing some work this summer on Arbutus Point. So I'm going to suggest that we'll call the vote to receive first. All those in favor? That'll be received, and then if council agrees, we'll write a letter to Kimberly Irving pointing out that there's work scheduled for Arbutus Point. And I don't think, do we need a motion for that? We don't need a motion. We'll deal with that in a letter telling them that this summer it's not possible. Next item of correspondence is the from George Lupton, notice of title for 1472 Seaway Drive. I need a mover and a seconder to receive. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Burton. All those in favor to receive. Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments to make on this particular item? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Last month I spoke to Mr. Lupton just in regards to some of his challenges that he's faced. He's the executor on this estate, and you'll see that we have the correspondence and kind of the timelines and everything that are there. And I was had a small conversation and that prior to this meeting, and I think that one of staff may have a recommendation for me. Yeah, so I'll put it just a little bit further. I'm just giving some advance notice.
Is it not possible to make recommendations now?
It's a little bit further in our agenda, so we'll put it there.
You want to wait till then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're moving on. Did I call the vote on receiving it?
Yes.
All those in favor? Yes, that's been done. Thank you. Okay. Hey, we got to hurry up here for Mr. Squire. He's got to be somewhere, and he can't be two places at the same time. Contract 3, City Yard Shop Building Construction Tender Award. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Burden. Mr. Squire, would you please give us the background on this issue?
Certainly, Your Worship. Thank you. The construction of the City Yard Shop Building is a high priority project and is required in order to help better serve the overall ongoing operational needs of the community's growing infrastructure. On December 15, 2016, the City of Parkesville issued a tender call for Contract 3, City Yard Shop Building, to retain a contractor's services for the construction of a 12,000 square foot shop located at the City of Parkesville Yard. The works involve the installation and construction of a pre-purchased air cadet hangar and site servicing for electrical, sanitary sewer, water, and storm drainage for the operations yard. The completion of this project will significantly improve the efficiencies in fleet services, metal fabrication, traffic services, general carpentry work, and will help provide an overall increase in the level of service the operations department and better service the growing community needs. Tender packages were submitted by 4 contractors, and bids were opened on public on February 9th, 2017 at 2 p.m. All proposals were determined to be complete and responsive. The bid results are shown in the report. The bids are, again, complete and indicate that the lowest bid represents the best current market value for the work. The low bid submitted by NAPIT Projects is approximately 1% higher than the architect's 50% design review, and it is agreed with the architect and city staff that NAPIT Projects Incorporated's reputation and experience indicates that the company is very capable of completing the work required. The requirement for the new shop is a direct result of the needs to service a growing community as indicated. However, this project is subject to development community cost charges. It is also recommended on top of this that we also include a 10% contingency fee be allowed for the project of this size and nature in the amount of $233,000 for unseen expenses and consulting fees. Should Council accept the proposal, low bid from NAPIT Projects of $2,333,000 and $150,000 in DCC costs in total, and a contingency amount as mentioned above, the total project cost is $2,716,000. A budget adjustment would be required in the amount of $224,100 to bring the budget up to that amount. This fund could come from the city's accumulated surplus.
Any questions for Mr. Squire? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks a lot, Mr. Squire. It's through you to the Director of Finance. From time to time when we get these reports, the contingency funds are built into that 10%, 15%. So if that project is completed and the contingency fund isn't used, where does that money go back? Does it go into general revenue, or does it go back into where it was taken out of? Do we ever have money left?
Yes, Your Worship, through to the councillor. We do have some projects that come in under budget, and it just goes back into accumulated surplus, which is where he's requesting funds to come from for the budget increase.
Any further questions from members of council? For Mr. Squire, Councillor Salt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm just trying to follow the crumbs. And so in 2015, there was a request for a hangar, which was $525,000. So have you already spent the $525,000 for this hangar, or is this $525,000 rolled into the $2 million that you're asking for now?
Yeah. Yes, through Your Worship. The 525 is identified in the report, and that's for the additional electrical servicing that's required for the hangar. The hangar budget itself was identified several years ago, and in doing so, we've carried forward until we're at the point where we actually need to construct the hangar. The hangar itself was purchased, again, 3 years ago at previous council's direction. It has been put on hold essentially until the actual configuration of the water treatment plant was established on the site. So again, we're at the point. So the 525 is requested last year was for the site servicing. That wasn't originally intended for the shop. But
That was not part of the shop, the 525.
oh, I'm sorry. It was actually, we're doing it as part of it's a brand new electrical service for both the shop, the existing building there, and the water treatment plant. It's just.
Okay, because I just really want to understand this, because I don't. I really need. So, because what I see is the 525, and then I see that in 2016, for Office of Gain and Engineering, we've got 782,462. So 708. So I'll say, 790,000 in 2016. So we've approved that 525. We approved the 782. So here we are now in 2017. And now you're requesting the $2,300,000, and so that's what I'm just trying to connect. Are these those numbers that we've already previously approved? Is that the money that you're taking from there to build this now, or have you already spent all that, and now you want the $2,300,000 new?
Through Your Worship, the monies previously approved are the monies that we're using. They haven't been spent; they've been carried forward, and we're using that for this budget.
For the so that's part of that $2 million?
That's part of it,
okay.
yeah.
I understand. Okay, so really you're just looking for the 224, really?
That's correct.
Any further questions from members of council? Councillor Oates.
The report doesn't, there's no explanation as to the rationale for recommendation number 4. So I'd like a little background on why we should do that, and how much is that?
Through Your Worship, we haven't, what we want to do, and we haven't tendered out the actual generator yet. It's a completely separate budget. The intent of tendering out the equipment for the generator is actually a cost savings. Instead of putting it under this contract and getting it, typically contractors mark it up by 10%. That tender hasn't gone out yet. We plan on tendering it in the next several months to get the proper vendor and ensure we have all the specifications, just need time to actually tender it out. What we're asking for at this point in time is if it's within the identified budgets for the generator, which is a separate line item not on this report, that council give us the authority to spend that money basically if it meets specification and if it's low bid and if it's under budget. I could come back, because there is a purchasing policy for anything over $100,000. I could come back to council once again and just give you the results of those bids if council does so wish to do so. But right now, for expediency and contractually, I just propose that recommendation.
Follow up, Councillor Rhodes?
Yeah, that's the first question. How much?
I'm sorry, through Your Worship, how much for the budget for the generator?
Yeah.
I don't have those numbers in front of me,
Mr. Butterworth, you have the answer to that?
Yeah, the budget for the generator is, I got it right here, that's the right page, $380,000 for backup generator, bulk fuel storage. Is that part of it? Yeah, bulk fuel storage, backup generator, $380,000.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it was my understanding that we had already approved that. That we had already approved that generator, right?
Wants to answer that question, Councillor or Mr. Squire?
Yeah, through your worship, the budget has already been approved for the generator, correct?
Right.
What we need to do now is tender it and ensure when we get the prices in that they are under budget. Technically, with our purchasing policy, given that that amount is over $100,000, I would have to come back to council and ask authorization for an award.
Okay, are we okay? Salter, you have another question?
Sorry, yeah, so just for a follow-up, so you will come back and request from council if that's the case, or are you asking to not come back?
Through your worship, recommendation number 4 is actually giving staff direction, if it is under budget, to proceed with the purchase of the generator.
Sure.
Okay. So, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the 4 recommendations? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. All right. The next item we have is the notice on title for the property located at 1472 Seaway Drive. First of all, before I get a mover and a seconder, I want to know if Mr. Lupton wishes to speak to this item. Is Mr. Lupton in the audience? He didn't come? Okay. So, Mrs. Keller, would you please give us the background on this issue? I'm not going to call for a recommendation yet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as Council is aware, a Section 57 filing under the Community Charter gives Council the authority to register something on title to identify or alert future prospective purchasers that there could be a potential issue with the property. In this particular case, work has taken place on the property without the benefit of a building permit or a demolition permit. The property is currently listed for sale, and I've been informed by the Director of Community Planning that we are actively getting inquiries on the property, and it appears that the listing indicates that all of the environmental permits and permitting are in place, which is not the case. The Section 57 filing is specifically intended to address these types of issues and essentially provide information to a future purchaser that they would be purchasing those problems or potential challenges with the property. In this particular case, I have been informed that as of this morning, the applicant or the executor in this case has presented or submitted a building permit application, but we have not had sufficient time to check it for completeness. I understand the Director of Community Planning can correct me that it's actually a demolition that the person is seeking to undertake at this time. And as Councillor Patterson mentioned, the executor has provided written chronology of events and is requesting that Council consider a delay on the filing.
Okay, what I'm going to do first, members of Council, is I'm going to go for the first recommendation that this particular issue be received. So I'll read the recommendation that the report from the Director of Administrative Services dated February 21st, 2017, entitled Notice on the Title of Property Located at 1472 Seaway Drive, Lot 6, District Lot 125 in the News District Plan, VIP 10841 be received. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Salter. All those in favor of that recommendation? Okay, so we have received the recommendation. Now I have other recommendations, but I'm going to open that up to Council. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. With staff consideration and conversation, and that we have in the past had a 30-day leeway prior to issuance, so what I'd like to propose is that should the owner or executor for 1472 Seaway Drive not submit a complete demolition or building permit application suitable for permit issuance within 30 days, the corporate officer be instructed to proceed with registering the Section 57 notice on title.
And Councillor Powell, comments on the Councillor Oates.
Question. The question to you, Your Worship, to our corporate officer, are we in a position of liability today?
That's difficult to answer. We are not obligated to issue permits. However, part of the reason why we would ask Council to consider a Section 57 would be to limit our liability and to ensure that we do our due diligence in terms of public safety and notify any prospective owners that they do have this situation on the property. We typically do wait. As Council will notice in the report, this commenced back in August, and while the executor has indicated that there were some extenuating circumstances, the Chief Building Inspector typically doesn't even advance these to the Administration Department until they feel that the time, sufficient time has passed, that it should have been resolved at this point. I don't know of any case where a city has been held liable. However, I think we probably do have some risk there if we don't proceed.
What is should the corporate officer file the notice as referred to, and the person and the property is brought in the future the property is brought into compliance, they can apply to the city to have that notice removed. What is the cost of having that notice removed?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, it's basically the legal cost. So the city, essentially what happens is the Chief Building Inspector will inform me as the corporate officer that the permit has been satisfied or issued, and that the issue has been rectified, and we then notify land titles that we are not, we don't object to it being removed, and so the cost is the owner's legal fees. So a few $100s, I would suggest, in legal fees.
Okay, I need to get, okay. No, I'll just let me think for a second.
Okay, Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I also spoke to Mr. Lupton, and yeah, from my understanding, he has submitted his permit. I'm hearing that you haven't had time to look it over yet. And so I think that Councillor Patterson's motion makes sense. That gives us time to look it over rather than jumping to, you know, going for a legal stance on this to give the citizen that time and to give us that time to take a look at it. It may well be in order, and in that case, this would have all been for naught. So I can see what happened, and I also recognize, and as he stated, with this winter storm that we had, he was pressed, badly pressed, and behind the 8 ball with regard to the snow. And I also see that WorkSafe were involved, and that the hazardous materials are gone. So basically, what's there is a shell that is of no concern as far as hazardous materials go at this time. So I don't see a need for us to push this really at this point. I would think if in 30 days he has not complied, I would be ready to do that.
Councillor Burton.
It appears to me from the report that we've been given that this has been the demolition has been going on for some time. We don't have any idea what's been taken out of there at this point in time. The executor has had a significant period of time in which to apply for a demolition permit. I'm going to make a brief assumption, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm guessing that the building inspector has spoken to him on more than one occasion with regard to this issue. I'm not going to support giving him any kind of an extension. I think that whether or not we're liable, there's a process that has to be gone through in order to protect the public, the future purchasers, the neighborhood. We don't know what material was in that building before the demolition process began. I would say that, judging from the pictures, it's been extensive and been going on for some time, and I can't support people blatantly disregarding the various processes that we have in place to protect people.
Quick question for you, Mrs. Keller. If we don't give the 30-day extension, what happens? Pardon me?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would proceed if council goes with the recommendation per the report. I would proceed to register the Section 57. Typically, it takes a few days for that to actually get through land titles, and then if and when a prospective purchaser is going through the paperwork, their lawyer or their representative would see that on the title, and if they haven't already checked with the city what the status of the property is, they would be prompted to do so by their lawyer or by the mortgage person.
So the risk would be that, not contacting the city, they could proceed with the sale where the project hasn't been completed. Okay. Councillor Oates, any more questions?
Yeah. Does it cost the city anything to file the notice?
Off the top of my head, I haven't ever seen a bill.
Okay, what I'm trying to get to is what's the hardship that this person would go through if we defeat this motion and pass a motion that will come up afterwards about the second recommendation? What is the hardship that this person would suffer? And that hardship would be the financial cost of changing the legal thing. And that's paid to land titles, not to the city?
Yes, if I may, through you, Mr. Mayor. Essentially, the applicant or owner would have to pay their lawyer to basically put together a request to discharge that Section 57 from their title. The city, through myself, in consultation with the building inspector, would confirm that we do not object, and then they would remove that notice from the title. I suppose, to answer your question about hardship, there would be time involved for the owner or executor in that case, and potentially somebody could walk away from the purchase, which is sort of the intent of the filing, though, so that they are aware of that, so it wouldn't be a surprise to them that the permits have not been issued.
Okay, just one final. And just as this question is to process, the reason this is in front of us is because, in staff's opinion, this is where it needs to be in this part of the process.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, that is correct. Typically, they don't come to us until the chief building inspector or the building inspector has expended significant time and effort trying to encourage the person to move forward. As the applicant has indicated, he believes there are reasons, and I think this is a complex property with other jurisdictions involved. He is referring to working with, I believe, the province on some First Nation issues. However, the chief building inspector felt when they sent the memo to administration that it was time, significant time had passed, and they hadn't seen the project advancing enough in their opinion. The chief building inspector was aware of the WorkSafe issues and some of the other challenges that were leading up to this. And so I can't speak for him. Obviously, he's not here, but his memo reflected some concern that things were not moving, and the fact that it was on the market was a really compelling factor for staff, and also the fact that some of the listing information was, we felt, misleading, and some of the applicants, prospective purchasers who have phoned the planning department also were of the understanding that everything had been issued, and were surprised to hear from staff that that was not the case.
Councillor Oates,
one more just a final comment. It seems to me that there seems to be extenuating circumstances on both sides here. I don't think that this should be a situation that should have any asterisks. Besides, therefore, I won't be able to support an extension. I think that there's enough time has gone by, as Councillor Burton has said, so I can't support the motion.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, I will add my concerns regarding this particular situation from what I understand, but perhaps you can correct me. The issue is not that the length of time for a demolition permit, but there wasn't a demolition permit at all. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Beale. The applicant never applied for the building permit until today. And that does sometimes occur when we, sort of an added benefit perhaps of this process is that sometimes the threat of a Section 57 filing is enough to actually expedite things on the applicant's side. I'm not sure if that was the case in this particular instance. He has submitted the application today. However, he had never attempted to submit the application for either a building permit or a demolition permit until today, which is why the report is coming forward.
And that's what I gathered from reading the end here. You know, granting an extension to submit the application, but the application should have been done before starting demolition, or if he was really unaware in the very early stages. So I too am very concerned that it's almost after the fact.
Councillor Salter, and then Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So and one more thing as well. When I spoke to this man, he wasn't sure what was going to happen with his house. It isn't his house. He's the what's it called, power of attorney or executor? Yeah, executor of the house. And he did mention that when he originally went in there, you know, the woman had passed away and she had been hoarding, so he had to clean all that stuff. He didn't really know what he was. Didn't really know what he was involved with until he got in there, and then at that point he wasn't sure whether they would be demolishing it or if he could build to it. So he didn't know. When he realized that there was the hazardous materials, he then contacted WorkSafe, and he had advised Mr. Peters of that back in July. As far as the us being responsible, the realtor is also responsible. My understanding that if you buy a property and nothing's been disclosed, then you go back to the realtor. So I'm not sure, and plus the province is also involved in this. I don't see this going anywhere until everything is in place. And as I said already, all of the hazardous materials have been removed. He has that from WorkSafe, and I know that he's submitted that. So,
Councillor Burton.
So, on the 6th of September, he went into a contract to remove the hazardous materials. Prior to that, he had been on the 18th of August. He had been advised that he was going to require a demolition permit. I don't see where any of these circumstances prevented him from applying for the demolition permit. And that's the issue. It's not about hazardous or difficult conditions or difficult weather or difficult dealings with a variety of other agencies. It's about the fact that he didn't seek to comply with the request to get a demolition permit when he had lots of notice, and then he went and signed a contract with an agency to remove the materials, knowing he required a demolition permit before he did that. So I'm not going to support this.
Okay, I think we're ready to call the vote. I tend to agree, and I want to err on the side of caution, so I won't be supporting this motion either. So we're going to call the vote.
Your Worship, I can withdraw.
Pardon me?
I'll withdraw.
You're withdrawing? So we need
to go back to the original recommendation.
So we're going. Page 27. Trust me, we've just received it.
Okay. We're here to help.
Okay? All right. We want to make sure that you're on the same page. All right.
We need a mover.
Okay, I've got a mover in Councillor Powell and a seconder in Councillor Beale. So, any further discussion? On the motion. And up first, you got beat to the punch. Any further comments? I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you. That is carried. All right. Now we have a report on the follow-up report on the consideration of a development variance permit to relax front line lot line setbacks at 838 Sanderson Road. And before I call for a mover and a seconder, is there anyone in the gallery who wishes to provide a comment to council on this particular issue? Okay, we have recommendations then, 2 recommendations in your reports. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Beale, seconded by Councillor Burden. Any discussion on the motion? Fairly straightforward. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, the Moss Avenue upgrade professional services for the detailed design of Moss Avenue Highway 4A to Craig Street. I need a mover and a seconder for the motion. Moved by Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Beale. Mr. Figuera, would you please give us the background on this issue?
If I may, Your Worship, before Council is a report to award the professional services for the detailed design and tender document preparation for Moss Avenue upgrade from Highway 4A to Craig Street. The project includes about 405 meters of street works to an urban local standard. Also included are upgrades to the storm sanitary and water infrastructure that are beyond their useful service life. As per city policy, a statement of qualification process was used to evaluate 11 consultants, and Coors & Associates was found to be the top-rated consultant prior to entering a professional services agreement for their bid of $120,653 plus tax. Staff seek council approval. Sufficient funds are available in the budget, and the recommendations are as per the report.
Any questions for Mr. Figuera? I have a question, Mr. Figuera, since nobody else has one. There's no mention in the report, at least none that I could find, in terms of were there other bids? I noted you listed 1 to 4 companies and ranked in order.
If I may, Your Worship,
you noted the top 4 in your report. Yeah,
there were 11 consultants evaluated. I just put the top 4 there so you could see some of the other ones, but there were 11 in our SOQ process that were evaluated, and what I reported in here was the top 4.
So was this the low bidder?
When we come to professional services, our SOQ process is different than awarding a tender for a construction contract. We award it first of all based on the best proposal, and then we look at the price and through our past experience make sure that we figure it's a good value, and if we do, then we make our recommendations accordingly.
Next report is the financial assistant request policy that council spoke about a few other council meetings ago. So I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Burden. Very appropriate. And on that note, Mrs. Keller, would you please give us the report on the financial assistance request policy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as Council is aware, we do have a policy for grant and aids program. However, at the February 6th Council meeting, Council asked staff to develop some criteria to assist with evaluating requests for financial assistance that are submitted outside of this established program. Occasionally, Council receives requests for financial assistance from groups or organizations that don't fit into this program for a number of reasons, or the timing doesn't work. As Council is aware, we have 2 intakes in the spring and the fall, and there's $2,500 assigned at each of those intakes. Council expressed a desire to provide ongoing opportunities for such organizations to bring requests forward for consideration, and in addition, Council wished to provide guidance to these groups as to what information is helpful in Council's decision-making process. Staff has prepared a draft policy for Council's consideration based in part on the criteria that is applied for grants and aid, however with some differences. And I would like to point out that this, if council is supportive of this policy, it is in no way binding on council. Council retains its discretion, and this policy is simply intended to communicate council's wishes with respect to the information that should be submitted to accompany such requests. And recommendations are per the report.
Questions for Mrs. Keller? Councillor Burton, Councillor Salter.
I'd like to thank you for your prompt work on this. I have one question with regard to item number 10. I just want to know what uniqueness means. I know it's called flexibility, and I'm trying to be a little bit more rigid.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Burton, that would be up to council to decide.
Kind of defeats things, doesn't it?
Councillor Salter. Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I have a question as well for number 8, applications for financial assistance for commitments or expenses incurred prior to the approval of the application will not be considered. So, meaning if someone finds themselves in a bind, why else would they be here? I'm not...
So this is, when looking at some options from other communities, this is a pretty consistent clause that I was able to see, and perhaps the Director of Finance might have some more information on this, but my understanding was that this is so that council is able to provide advice to the requester on some of the aspects of what it is they're seeking, and so it's not an after-the-fact approval. As I mentioned, this policy would not be binding on council. It's merely guidance, and so no policy is intended to take away council's discretion. However, this is something that we had just seen across.
Sorry. I still don't really understand that, though. I would think that nobody would come here if they didn't find themselves in need of a financial some financial assistance, and that happens prior to coming for the help generally for financial assistance. So this says that if you incurred this prior to coming, you're not eligible. And I know number 10 is there, but what I also know is that when rules are put in place, they're adhered to, and maybe this council will be flexible and the next one may not. So I want to know what that one speaks to. So not that others are doing it, but what exactly does it mean?
So it's actually speaking to, for example, if somebody came to council and they were requesting funding for an event that was to occur 3 weeks from now, then council would consider it on its merits. But if they came and said, we went to an event 6 months ago, it cost us $1,000 and now we would like council to pay for that, that is what it's intended to address. And I think it's really just, in some respects, to allow council to provide input on the expenditure prior to its occurrence. Again, if that's something that this council doesn't think they want to put on as a limit, staff could take direction from council to remove it or edit it in any way.
Okay. Councillor Oates.
Thank you. I echo Councillor Burton's when he noted the promptness of getting this back. That's noted and appreciated. I see this as like more of a general roadmap for the public that are coming forward, as opposed to a solid cut and dried template for council. And the roadmap shows all these 9 different things, and they're perhaps the major freeways to get you where you want to go. And number 10 is the back roads. So yeah, that's the uniqueness part of it. So I think that it'll put some responsibility back on the proponent to justify their request. And like any policy, this might be something that needs to be revisited and tweaked as we go forward. But I think it's an excellent first step, and I will be supporting the 3 recommendations.
Any further comments or questions? I'd also like to echo my thanks, first of all. And I was reading it very, very diligently until I got to number 10 and said, it all comes back to council. So I thought that was, I applaud you for leaving that as number 10. If I had read that at number 1, I probably wouldn't have bothered reading all the others. Okay, so we're ready to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you, that is carried. Gets to be benevolent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So under the provision of the city's grant and aid application, the city may provide direct financial assistance to community groups and organizations for events and projects that will benefit the citizens and visitors of the municipality. As mentioned, there are 2 intakes for the city's grant and aid applications. This is the spring intake. The deadline was Wednesday, March 1st. And we definitely did see unprecedented amounts being requested. And I spoke to a number of people who've been doing this for a lot longer than I have, and they have never heard of it being this high either. So perhaps just to mention, for any of the applications that perhaps did not meet the spring grants and aid requirements, staff was also thinking that if council supported the previous policy, they may fit under that. So we may be bringing them to you under a different report in the future. And recommendations for this are per the agenda.
Thank you very much. It gives me pleasure to announce that I'm appointing Councillors Powell and Burden to the Grant and Aid Select Committee. So, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Anyway, no, all on the recommendations.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay.
We should set aside a whole week.
Okay. Councillor Patterson, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. As Council is aware, I'm the liaison for the civic actions and youth at Bolinas, and I know that they were late in putting in a grant and aid application, so that number would have actually been higher as well. So I will be at our next council meeting once their request is seen by staff to bring it back forward again. They will also be putting in I'm not sure if it's an application, but a notice to appear as a delegation and chit-chat a little bit about what they have been doing in this community and where funds and things are looked at.
Financial assistance request policy will kick in at that time.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Medical marijuana dispensaries. I need a mover and a seconder to receive only. Councillor Powell, Councillor Beal. The motion is to receive. All those in favor to receive? Thank you. Discussion on this motion, because I certainly have some issues. I'm going to throw that out to council. Well, just to receive. No, Mrs. Keller, do you want to give us the background on this? I may have done this a little bit premature, but I'd like the background anyway.
So the issue of medical marijuana dispensaries has become a challenge for many cities. As some of council may know, the Supreme Court of BC recently ruled in favor of the city of Abbotsford and confirmed that municipalities can regulate these types of business through licensing and zoning bylaws under the current legal regime. The federal law in this matter has been in a state of flux for several years, and announcements from the Government of Canada recently in the throne speech and at other venues indicate that a lot more change is coming our way. However, there remains a lot of uncertainty about when the changes will actually come and what they will look like when they do. In the interim, there appears to be many individuals and groups who are taking a strong political stand to force the issue. Some cities have decided to permit medical marijuana dispensaries and enact regulations about how and where they operate. Other cities are strongly opposed to these uses while they remain illegal under the criminal code. This is a highly political and controversial issue, and as a result, staff is requesting council direction on how to proceed. I will note that we have a medical marijuana dispensary operating currently in the city. It does not have a business license and has since applied for a business license, and also has applied for a sign permit, which staff have been holding until we receive direction from council on how you would like to proceed. At the moment, staff recommendations per the agenda were simply to receive, and staff is seeking direction from council. If that is not all that council would like to do, we would request an additional direction through resolution of council.
I'm going to go first on this, council, and I'm going to throw it open. When I was elected mayor, I was elected to uphold the law, and I swore that I would uphold the law. The law in Canada still states that this kind of an operation is illegal, and I'm not interested in having an illegal operation in my town, in my city, where I live. So I don't know if that generates any enthusiasm among fellow members of council, but I would like to see this place closed down. Councillor Burden.
This is similar in some ways to the issue of the derelict building not applying for a permit. I did a little research this afternoon, and I found a lovely article about how to set up a marijuana dispensary, and the second paragraph says, like compassion clubs, marijuana dispensaries are also illegal, although many business people choose to open dispensaries in cities where marijuana is a very low priority target for law enforcement action. I don't believe it should be a low target. I know that the federal government is making efforts to change the law, but at this point in time, the law says that this is an illegal activity, and I believe as representatives of the community, we need to uphold that law. And I would like to go beyond asking bylaw enforcement and the business license process. I'd like to request that the RCMP go in there and enforce the law. And it's a request. They are the official representative of law enforcement for the federal government. This is a federal statute which prohibits the sale of marijuana in this fashion, and I'd like to see them go and enforce that federal law as they're required to do so. Yes.
That's pretty much your motion.
We make a request to the RCMP to enforce the laws regarding marijuana as they stand in the country today.
But the overall motion is that we close it down.
Shut them down.
All right. I have a seconder for that? Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Oates. Okay, discussion on the motion. Councillors.
Thank you, Worship. You know, the federal government has left us in limbo. And unfortunately, because of that, we've had to deal with illegal pot shops, or whatever you want to call them. You know, I think we need to get ahead of this. I think doing the knee-jerk reaction, shut it down, is not going to work. I think that we need to start really seriously looking at this language, because eventually the federal government will get it together, and then it'll be an expectation. We've got these opening up in our community. I know when I worked for the Ministry for Children and Families, we would go out and it would be, they would have a licensed grow up, and there was nothing that the RCMP could do, and it's the same with this. And so I don't believe that having the RCMP go out and shut it down is going to work, because one, they have way better things to do with their time instead of this cycle that they're going to get into with the grow-ups, because when was it? Last year the other one was the shop. And so now we've got another one pushing the limit. I think we have, they didn't get a business license for a reason. They had opened their shop, and the same day I was coffee with council, a fellow came in and said, what about it? We do have our kids that are going there. I worked with the youth in this community before I retired a week ago tomorrow, I'm very happy to say. And I know that they're at risk. And yet we police alcohol. To me, this is the same idea. We need to police it. We need to get out in front of it. We need to deal with it in a way that when it does come through as legal, we're ready to move. Because just shutting the door and pretending it doesn't exist and not being there is not going to work. I think we need to come out ahead of it. Think outside the box.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, and I agree with what Councillor Powell is saying. I know it's illegal, but I also understand that really we are in a bad situation. The feds are dragging their feet on it, but we know what they're doing. We know the direction they're going in. And it says here, it's likely cities will face legal challenges if they try to prohibit the marijuana uses outright, if and when they're legalized at the federal level, and it may be beneficial to design a framework that works specifically for Parksville. And for us, we're going to be caught. We're going to be caught with this because at some point this is going to be supported. It's going to be approved, and when it is, it's going to be the wild, wild west out there, and we'll have nothing in place. Yeah, one thing for sure is, for me, I don't even know if we can do this, but for me, I would like to see this not in the downtown core, and I would also like to see no one under 25 utilizing that place. But those things we can work out. But I think we need to get something in place. It's coming anyways. It's just like the vote when women didn't get to vote, and these conversations happened, but we finally got to vote. It's going to happen, and we can't keep it from moving forward. We can't. There's 6 of us, so I agree we need to deal with this.
Okay. I'm gonna let the mover speak because he's got something to say, and then I'll come back.
I don't disagree with the statement that we have to get out ahead of this, and I believe in some regards the City of Parksville has already gotten out ahead of it because we have already assigned certain zones within our zoning bylaw as acceptable for this kind of an operation. I believe in the industrial park and agricultural land that this type of activity is eligible to receive a business license based on the allowable uses under those zones. So we are in some ways already getting out ahead of it. I guess what I'm really concerned about is the flagrant, again, disregard for the established policies that we would like to see our city operate under. And I agree, Councillor Salter, the downtown core is not the place for this kind of activity. So I don't disagree that we need to get out ahead of it. The statement that when this is legalized, I don't know when that's going to be. And I don't know if when is a reality. There are all sorts of things that can happen between now. I know the stated intention of the federal government, but I don't know the actual, I don't know when they're going to follow through with that intention. Gosh, I could probably fill a warehouse with the number of campaign promises that they haven't kept so far. So I would strongly recommend that we disallow this particular activity in our community as it is right now. It's illegal. As a group, we have been charged with some degree of upholding legality within our community, and I think we need to honor that.
Okay, we're going to go to Councillor Beale, Councillor Oates, and Councillor Patterson, and then Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Worship. I have a question, and I guess for staff. And in our options on page 71, option 3, council may direct staff to develop a regulatory regime for medical and recreational marijuana dispensaries and marijuana-related activities. My question is it possible and reasonable to ask staff to at least build some foundational work here so that, I mean, my concern again is that if we just say, oh, just shut it down and we really don't have a plan in place, then when and if something does change, we'll be in a situation where, you know, they apply for a business license and it's, you know, on the Alberni Highway, right? And, you know, it's maybe not where we would want to have it. And I know that it's been mentioned that the industrial park is an area, but that was with the understanding that it was for the production of the medical marijuana. It wasn't necessarily a place where one was going to be purchasing it and so on. So I'm just wondering either if work has already been done, or could we look at option 3? Does that necessarily assume that we're saying go ahead and issue business licenses, or does it allow us to be somewhat ready when the time comes?
Mrs. Keeler?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Beale. We certainly could take a stance that at the moment it's not legal, and council could direct us that we don't want to be issuing business licenses for something that's illegal now. There are a number of cities that have gone forward with some ideas on how they are regulating, and so staff could certainly start the process to look at those options and bring that to council in a report that has kind of a matrix of what it is you would like to see. I mentioned a couple in the report, but the City of Victoria has a rezoning requirement so that council basically looks at everything on a site-specific basis. The City of Vancouver allows for them, but under very strict circumstances. They have to be a certain distance from each other and distance from other uses, no on-site consumption, just like you wouldn't see someone drinking in the liquor store. Other regulations about signage and advertising and packaging and keeping it behind kind of closed doors. So some of the larger communities are already coming up with some of these ideas, and if council were to direct staff to do that, we would get legal advice and almost build a couple of options so that if and when the law changes, we're kind of ready to launch into action with some sense of what council would like to see, and then I'm sure it would involve bylaw amendments and things like that, so we could then bring them to council in a timely manner. Usually we do get a little bit of a heads up from the feds as to what things are going to be coming our way, and we can react fairly quickly if we have the research. I've done some of it already, but it would be just developing something that we could present to council and get specific yeses and nos on some of those things, so that's definitely doable.
Thank you. I realize that's not the motion. There is a different motion on the table right now, so I can't speak to that, but I'm really encouraged by that response, and personally I would like to see us be ready in that regard.
Councillor Oates.
Well, I think there's a lot of things at play here, and we got to go through this carefully. We got to go complete A before we go to B, before we go to C. And I think one of the first things we got to determine from council is do we want it in our town at all, irrespective of what the feds do? Because the feds could make it legal, and we could say we still don't want it here. I think we'd have a difficulty with respect to the medical marijuana. We may come into a foul of a human rights complaint if we didn't allow medical marijuana. But I do believe we have the ability to regulate recreational marijuana and say we don't want that in our town. Now I'm getting into what I didn't want us to get into, because I'm talking about a motion that is not even on the table. We're talking about a motion that's made here now, and I don't think anybody is going to be able to vote against this motion, because the motion is to uphold the law. So I'm going to have a tough time voting against this motion. And it's what we're trying to react to is the opening of this business in our jurisdiction without a business license. And so we're saying we're saying to the feds, go in there, and if there's anything illegal in there, act on what your abilities are to act. But what are our abilities as a city to act? They don't have a business license. So can we not just go in and shut them down on that basis? Does the city not have some sort of legal recourse? And we can do both. We can do what we can have the feds go in there and say we want you to investigate and see if there's anything illegal on site and uphold the law, notwithstanding their belief that the law is going to change, and it'll change in such a short order that they won't have an opportunity to prosecute it. But I'm with the mayor. We got to uphold the law today, and the law today says it's illegal, so we could have them go do that. But we also got to do our part too, and our part would be whatever we can do with respect to the bylaw that exists right now, that they're contravening, and that is operating a business without a license. Irrespective of the business, it's got nothing to do with the business. It's got so we must have some teeth to be able to do what seems to be the desire of the mayor to do, to shut them down. So we should have the ability to do that. So I'm going to support the motion that's before us. And then after that, I'm going to be putting forward a motion to with respect to option number 2. And that is for the medical marijuana dispensaries, because I believe that we would run afoul of human rights legislation if we didn't allow that sort of operation to be here in town. But I don't believe that the citizens of Parksville want recreational marijuana dispensaries within their borders. Certainly none of the people that I talk to.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have a couple questions and comments. So I really feel that we need a police recommendation or comment. That being said, I still want a police liaison. I would like seriously to have someone in contact, like a counselor, so that we're having some knowledge and everything from the police when we have something like this that comes before us, and we can say, okay, our detachment has said, because we brought it up, because this is on our agenda, and I think that's, we need to yeah, I did see that one, on that, but I really do feel that I would really like to see a council liaison in regards to the police. So I don't know how to make that motion later on down the road, but that's what. But my next comment and everything is, this property was rented out. Okay, like there's a landlord and everything involved. This is in our downtown core. This shouldn't have happened. This should not have been rented out. So can we not have some conversation with the owner of the building as well? I'm sorry, but they should not. It's an illegal activity that's going on. So I don't know how to do that, to say.
Mrs. Keller?
Staff, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillors, both Oates and Patterson. From the enforcement side, we do have steps that we can take, and we have actually initiated those steps already. The day that this came to our attention, we had the bylaw enforcement officer go down to the site and determined that they were operating and were in fact dispensing marijuana. That was a question that was asked. We have issued them a written warning at this point, telling them what they are doing in contravention of our regulations, that they do not have a business license, that they do not have a sign permit. We've also instructed them to talk to the building inspector, as we believe there may have been some things that required a building permit. And we are not 100% sure that it is in compliance with zoning either. So there are a number of issues that need to be resolved. We typically start with a written warning, and then if we don't get compliance through that, we have the next option of issuing fines. If the fines are not paid, they go to collections after a certain period of time. The person does have the ability to ask for our tickets to be screened and withdrawn, so there is a process there as well. And ultimately, if somebody is not willing to comply through those measures, we end up with a court order. That is what happened in the Abbotsford case, and a court injunction was successfully obtained by that city. And so under the current regime, the current federal regime, I believe we would have success. My only concern is just on the timing, because it does take a significant amount of time to get the injunction. And we don't know, as Councillor Burden and several other councillors have said, we don't know what will happen or when it will happen or if it will happen. However, we can still proceed as if things are the way they are, if the law is the way it is today. I think we have the case law to indicate that we are allowed to regulate this under our powers that we are granted, that people do require a business license to operate within our jurisdiction, and we do have the right to withhold those licenses. The process would be if our license inspector rejects the application, then the person has the right to appeal to council, and council can make the decision from there, and we're essentially, again, if someone's refusing to comply in a legal situation where we're compelling them through the courts to comply.
I'm going to speak.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I actually have a few questions, and oh, here they are. Okay. So number one, when you mentioned the zoning, though, they must be in contravention because that's not agricultural land.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Salter. So the zoning bylaw for C3 zone, which is the zone that they're in, allows for retail sale. Typically, at the local government level, we kind of implicitly do not allow anything illegal. That's just sort of how it kind of goes. However, they have admitted verbally that they are selling marijuana from the property, whether it be medical or not. Even if it is medical at this point, that's not currently legal. We would just need to get some legal advice on which would be the best route, whether we go after them for zoning bylaw infraction, business license infraction, sign permit, building permit. The City of Abbotsford's zone expressly prohibited the sale of marijuana. Our zone implicitly prohibits it by allowing it expressly in another, well, not actually allowing the sale. We don't allow the sale from the property in any case.
Yeah, I know.
We allow the growing and processing and that type of thing from 2 other zones. So our feeling is that it was never intended to support that use. We don't expressly allow that use, and therefore I believe our position would be it's not permitted. However, we would want to get legal advice on how best to proceed with the zoning aspect. I think we're more confident and more sure on the business license aspect that it doesn't matter if it's permitted in the zoning or not. If you don't have a business license, you're not allowed to operate.
So, and then my next question is, with regard to RCMP, as I was also going to bring that up, I would like to know whether they have the resources to assist us with this, because if they're breaking the law, then, as Council Burden had said, police can go and shut them down. But can they? Do they have the resources? I know what I've been hearing, which is, yeah, they get shut down, and 2 days from now they're open again, and they get shut down. And we know that we've only got one officer who does traffic. Do we have the resources, or do we want to have the police come and have a conversation with them about this, just so we can get a handle on it?
So through the mayor to Councillor Salter, we are working with the RCMP on this, and we, as I've stated several times, we are very grateful for the relationship that our bylaw officers have with the RCMP. The day that this occurred, the RCMP corporal that we liaise with on a fairly ongoing basis was in touch with the landlord and the operator, letting them know this is not a legal activity. We have been working with the staff sergeant as well, just to let them know that this is happening. I can't speak to their resources. I know they always say that they need more, but we do work very closely with them on all of these issues, and when we need them, they are there. They help us to serve warrants and all those, or serve notices and things like that all the time. So I know that they would be willing to help us as much as they can, obviously given their priorities. But I'm not sure on the legal side whether they have the resources or not. But we have our own abilities, and so with or without the RCMP's assistance, we do have avenues for enforcement that I think I'm hearing from council that we would be pursuing.
I'm going to try and get the final word on this before we take the vote. I said in my opening statements that this is flagrantly breaking the existing law, and I won't vote for anything that empowers breaking the law. And the illogic of some of the arguments I've heard around the table is this. We don't know what the federal government law is going to look like. We have no idea. So by saying, well, we leave them open because we're going to have to do this anyway, the federal government may come down with all sorts of conditions and criteria that we don't know about yet. So there's no point in trying to anticipate what the federal government's going to do or not going to do. We don't know. I personally like what Councillor Beal was talking about. We could go there on a separate basis, but I want these people closed down. Somebody that comes to the city of Parksville, rents space, and says openly, I'm going to sell marijuana for medicinal purposes and for recreational purposes. Where the hell are they getting the marijuana? Where are they getting the marijuana? They're not going to tell you the truth where they're getting the marijuana. They'd be getting the marijuana from any Tom, Dick, and Harry around here. So I'm not going to support that. That's a criminal activity as far as I'm concerned. I don't care who knows it. And I can't get adamant enough about this type of situation where flagrantly people come into a city like Parksville, they open up on a downtown street, and we're selling marijuana. I know there's a lot of people out there who are advocates of marijuana and who can't wait for the day when it's legal. So they're opening up all these stores. They're making all kinds of money. Municipalities aren't getting their fair share. I want to do this properly. When the federal government says, here is the law on selling medical and recreational marijuana, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we'll develop something at that time so that we put it in the right place and we have the right kind of revenues for the city that we're going to need, because this is going to cause other problems. If you watch what's happened in Colorado and other states where they've legalized marijuana, there's a hell of a lot of problems to this stuff. This is not going to be a cakewalk. So on that basis, unless anybody's got any other comments, I'm going to call the vote on Councillor Burton's motion. Pardon me? Would you read the motion again, please?
So the motion was that staff go beyond business license enforcement to close this operation and further request RCMP enforce the law and prohibit the sale of marijuana in this location. Yes.
Yeah. And further going back, Mrs. Kaler, if I could ask your indulgence to, and the reason I was thinking option 3 is that just to have that information on hand, to be prepared, even though we may in fact choose to limit it to medical marijuana as possible, but to have as much information and some foundational templates or suggestions. So I would like to move that option 3 there. I don't think I need to read it out. Everybody's got it. Okay, council will direct staff to develop a regulatory regime for medical and recreational marijuana dispensaries and marijuana-related activities. Do I need to add anything to that, in order to prepare for a time when and if this becomes legal?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Beal. I think what would be helpful is just to know when council would do you want us to wait until the law is changed before we present it, or do you want that in anticipation and then we would just wait to implement until the law is changed?
Unless you find something which some other small city or large city is doing, I don't think we have a choice but to wait until what the feds come down with.
There are a lot of different options that we can present kind of in a framework, and then get some direction from council so that we're ready, and then we may need to tweak it or come back to council if the law goes a totally different direction that we were anticipating.
That's exactly my thinking, to create some possible frameworks, because there will be more than one, with the thought that when and if we have direction from the federal government, that it would be tweaked as needed to suit our community.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Are you seconding the motion? Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Oates.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of it, because I don't believe the citizens of the city of Parksville want a recreational dispensary in town. So developing a framework or a regulatory regime that enables that to happen is sort of encouraging something that I really believe that the public have no appetite for here. I believe that they would have an appetite for a medical marijuana dispensary, but I don't think that the public here has an appetite for a recreational marijuana dispensary, nor do they have an appetite for marijuana-related activities. I'm okay with something for medical marijuana dispensary out in the industrial park like we envisioned out there. Fine, stays in line with human rights, but you know, there's going to be no shortage of places to go get your baggie, and I don't think Parksville needs to be on that list.
My only comment to that is, is that, again, depending on the federal law may say you may, you know, a company may open a recreational marijuana office, and then we have to fight not to open it. And I don't know what our legal grounds would be at that point in time.
The recent Supreme Court ruling gives us the right to say, "Thou shalt not sell." We have the right to say that, right? And I'm you know, if you know, whether or not the federal government makes it legal, recreational marijuana legal or not, does not mean that the city of Parksville has to issue business licenses for someone to sell recreational marijuana. There are, I know of other jurisdictions where they're like dry counties and that sort of thing, right? So there's, the motion before us is to develop a regime that contemplates recreational dispensaries and further contemplates marijuana-related activities. That's not the Parksville I know.
Well, I just want to conclude my remarks by saying that if the federal law says you can sell recreational marijuana, we might find ourselves in a dilemma of what to do about that.
I just finished saying the Supreme Court says we can regulate it. You obviously disagree with what the Supreme Court has said we can do.
But the Supreme Court hasn't seen the latest law that the federal government's going to enact. Okay. Councillor Salter and then Councillor Burden. Oh, you didn't have your hand up? Yeah, okay, Councillor Salter.
I don't disagree with what Councillor Oates is saying, but at the same time, I don't think that there is any harm in doing some of the prep work, and I guess that's what I'm hearing that this is all about, is doing some of the prep work so that should the federal government make a decision, we're not scrambling. And that prep work may include, we don't want it here. How do we ensure that we don't want it here? Or how do we ensure that we have our wish?
Councillor Salter, and then I'll go back to Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to inform Council that marijuana has nothing on other drugs such as methadone and Suboxone, which no, they're not. In fact, not only are they not illegal, but they're being dispensed by doctors, and they're paid for by the provincial government, so they're not illegal. Do we love those drugs? No. Do we love heroin? No. But this is what people do instead of they take this to get themselves off of heroin, and so it's supported by the provincial government. So in saying that, you may all not know that those drugs are currently in Parksville, and they're being utilized by people who live here because it is it's legal. And so with regard to marijuana, we do not know the law at this time. Maybe it will and maybe it won't. We don't know. We're just sitting here. It's going to be done to us, not with us. That's number one. And if it is done to us, it'll be a charter issue. It won't be about us saying, well, no, it's like I want to sell bikes, and well, nobody in Parksville rides bikes, so we don't want a bike shop in Parksville. It'll be the same thing. It will be a charter issue. I think we do need to be ahead of it, and I think this motion makes an awful lot of sense. It's proactive rather than being reactive when we get hit with this. So it makes very good sense to me.
Councillor Oates.
Again, it gives the illusion that the people of Parksville support a recreational marijuana dispensary and marijuana-related activities. And I don't for a minute believe that the majority of the people of Parksville support that. Whether or not it doesn't matter what the government makes it, whether they make it illegal or illegal or what they do with it. We have the ability to say, we don't want that business in our town. Or we certainly have the ability to tax it to a point where they got no interest in coming here. You know, we certainly have the ability to do that. So to go down a road to explore a regime for recreational marijuana is like exploring plans for a pipeline dock when you don't support the pipeline. So I just don't get it. I don't get it. And this is not about the benefits or whether marijuana is a good thing or a bad thing. This is about us as elected officials gauging what we believe the temperature of the public are out there with respect to this issue. And I really believe that you know what? I bet you once we get a little bit of coverage about this discussion, we'll find out because people start contacting us. But I believe that the people of Parksville are tolerant towards medical marijuana, but I don't believe that they want a head shop in downtown Parksville or anywhere else. I don't believe that for a minute. And for that reason, I can't support setting up a regime that contemplates that we possibly would do that. So this gets passed, it's out there, and then someone asks either one of us, what sort of marijuana-related activities were you contemplating that you wanted regulated? I'd be interested in what your answer would be to that person. To me, you're opening a can of worms by going down the recreational road. Let them go somewhere else.
I'll give you a big unless. Just let me answer Councillor Oates' question, because it's an interesting discussion. But I've watched what's happened in the state of Colorado, and when the cities saw the amount of revenue that they could generate, and the resultant less tax increases on the citizens of, I forget what city it was, and I forget how much money was involved. My answer to you is, well, I'd like to cross that bridge when I come to it. I don't want to make any comments now. Go ahead, Councillor Burton.
I'd like to start by saying that the revenue that was received by Boulder, Colorado, was all spent on social programs to rectify the issues that rose out of. Okay, so I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion that eliminates the words "and recreational dispensaries and marijuana-related activities," leaving the motion as council directs staff to develop a regulatory regime for medical marijuana. Yeah, so we're looking at option 2, basically, but we need to deal with the motion that's on the table. Yeah. So I'd like to deal with it by proposing that amendment.
Okay, so I'll call the vote on the first.
No, you're going to look for a seconder for the amendment, and then you're going to call for a vote on the amendment, and then we'll vote on the amendment.
I don't know if I can find a seconder. Oh, I found. Oh, Councillor Oates. To my surprise.
Yeah, because that's redundant. Because there already is an entire book in place with regard to selling medical marijuana. You've been to Tilray? What was their name? Wildflower? They also, there is. Because it's already made. We don't have to. It's done.
Good. But under the present law, you can't sell medical marijuana in a shop. You have to go to Tilray to get it.
That's
Tilray
right. It's
mails
done
it to
by
you.
mail.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So we have a seconder. We don't have to vote on the first motion.
We have to vote on the amendment.
We're voting on the amendment.
On the amendment. Okay. All right. Are we ready to vote on the amendment? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That amendment is defeated. So we'll come back to the original motion.
Call the question.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Essentially, this report is to rise and report on the sale of 183 McVickers. The sale has since completed. In April, Council resolved to advertise and entertain bids for the purchase of 183 McVickers with a minimum price of $400,000. One bid was received, and the property has since been sold for $425,000. And the recommendation is to receive per the agenda.
Okay, that's the recommendation to receive. I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. All right, we're coming slowly to a close. First of all, we have bylaws, final adoption. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Patterson. We have 4. The Sanitary and Storm Sewage System Amendment Bylaw, the Water Service System Amendment Bylaw 2017, number 132028, the Sewer Parcel Tax Amendment Bylaw 2017, number 1493.4, and the Water Parcel Tax Amendment Bylaw 2017, number 1494.4. Recommendation is there. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. All right. I'm going to go around the table on new business tonight. I'll start with Councillor Burton.
Oh, look, my microphone's on. I just want to throw out a couple of commendations to staff. I was really, really pleased to see the streetlight changes along 19A. I don't know how many people have noticed that the old Python heads have been converted to LEDs, and that thrills me no end. And also just get the email congratulations out into the public. Well done to the planning department with regard to the record number of building permits. Thank you. That is what I mentioned to the mayor earlier today. When we maximize the value of the buildings on the land within the city boundaries, we maximize the tax revenue and don't have to increase taxes on an individual basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to speak to attending the Wounded Warriors race down at the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 49, on the 24th of April. I attended with Councillor Powell and bought a T-shirt that says Wounded Warrior. But I want to say that, we spoke to a woman who had come down from Qualicum. Well, she had been on the whole race, but had come from Qualicum down to Parksville, and she was quite exhausted and very emotional when she reached the Legion, and she stated that she is with the forces, and then got cancer, and so she was just getting over the chemo and the treatments that she had been getting with cancer, and decided to do the race, and so she was quite exhausted, but she still was quite proud of herself that she was able to do this run, and I think it's a really important issue out there with regard to our first responders, as well as people who are in the military and the army and the forces, because they are suffering from all of the things that they see almost daily, and we are healthy and we are safe, and we live in a free society because of all that they do, but also because of all that they're going through. So just to support them. So you can still donate to the Wounded Warriors if you wish, and I think it's a fantastic organization.
Yes, a couple of things quickly. The 25th was the walk for the coldest night of the year, and locally close to $30,000 was raised, which will really help with the especially providing the services of an outreach worker as part of the host team. The target is for $40,000. And again, people still can donate to that by going to coldest night of the year. And I think it was a great walk. Our team did 10 kilometers and raised some money, so it was good. I do have some new business as well. I'd like to bring forth a motion, and it's looking ahead to next year and subsequently regarding shelters and other amenities at bus stops. So I would like to request that staff be directed to prepare a report for council on the feasibility and costs of providing benches and shelters at key bus stops in the community, and further that this item be referred to council's 2018 budget deliberations.
Second to that. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. Can I speak?
Yes, sure, go ahead.
And I would like to add that my intention and my hope is that bringing this up as a budget item, that this could become part of a 5-year plan, so that it's not something that we would accomplish all at once, but to get some sort of plan in place. We presently have, for instance, the bus stops right out in front of the City Hall, which are actually, what do you call this, a transfer spot. So they're end points, and a lot of people wait here, and yet there are no shelters in place. I have had people from the community come to me to speak to me about this topic. One person did a lot of work on it and noted that if you go and shop for your groceries and you take the bus, Wembley Mall, Save-On does have access to a shelter, but other spots here in town don't even have a bench rather. And so there are certainly places that would benefit from this. And if we want to encourage people to be involved with active transportation, I think we need to make it a little more comfortable, a little easier for people.
Those are good points. Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Maybe this is something that you can also...
Pardon, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor Powell interrupted me.
Have a conversation towards the RDN, because it's public transportation, and whether or not we can see about working together in conjunction with that.
The RDN, I'm going to a transit select committee next week, I think. I'll bring it up there, depending on the vote tonight. But the RDN doesn't pay for stuffs in Parksville, not in my recent history. And the other option we have, and Councillor Beale and I talked about this earlier today, is that you can get advertising for some of these things at these bus stops, and that helps defray some of the cost.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess from my perspective, the amount we pay for transportation to the RDN, I think they should be paying for the structures. Thank you, Your Worship. And yes, I did attend Wounded Warriors as a deputy mayor. I have to echo what Councillor Salter said. It was pretty moving, the runners that came in, and they were tired, they were emotional. I did have an opportunity to talk to a fellow who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, and he had a dog, and he'd had a dog for about 9 months. And when I spoke to him, I asked him, I said, did he notice a difference? He said, absolutely. And the dogs are just amazing, you know, and to see, I don't think we appreciate what somebody goes through that when they go to war and what they see. I don't think any human should be exposed to what they see, but they are. The fire department was there, they were represented. I don't know if anybody knows this, we do have a fireman that talks about post-traumatic stress on Facebook. And, you know, like they see things that normal people don't see, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. I also attended the curling tournament. I opened that up on Thursday evening. It was the mixed tournament. I went back this first time. I always say I'm going to go back and watch a game. Well, I went back on Saturday and I watched a game, and it was supposed to be 8 ends, and it ended up being 9. And I got to tell you, I was nail biting. It was like that. It was right, and I never thought that curling would be like that. It was the last shots on both games, and it was like you're looking and you're thinking, what are they going to do? And then all of a sudden they do it, and it's like, oh, you know. Anyways, I really, really enjoyed it. And again, once again, our curling club put on a very successful event. Now I got to phone Jim Wade and find out who won the final tournament.
Thank you, Worship. A couple of things. I attended in your absence, I attended the RDN meeting last week. Just a couple of things I want to mention. They're in film. They're the film group. They came and they made a presentation there. They're part of their presentation. They had some more financial figures. They contributed over $100 million into the local economy, Vancouver Island economy, last year, and the production alone on the History Channel or Discovery Channel, it came back here again last year in the Mount Waddington area. They generated over $800,000, and there was 30 productions in total shot all around the island. 155 local crew were hired just for the Chesapeake Shores production, and there was over 10,000 hotel rooms. So that is a significant economic impact that industry brings to the island. The RDN supported a request for $5,000 for funding. They also supported a motion to come up with a regional strategy to generate funds equitably among the people to a total of $50,000 for the RDN for next year. And my sense around that table that there was some support for that. There was also an interesting presentation from the BC assessment. The assessment rates here on the island, I guess, are up 11.6%, a 10-year high. All his details will come out in the minutes. I don't have all the numbers here. As well, I'd like to make a motion on not related to the RD. Oh, what else? Oh, on the 23rd, I also attended the open house that the city hosted for the Corfield project. I want to recognize the really good job that Vaughn Figuera and Deb Tardif did in hosting that. Every question was asked except what time would the workmen be taking lunch and what would they be having for lunch. But other than that, I think everything was pretty much explored. The patience of Job is a word a phrase that came to mind to describe Vaughn Figuera that evening. But great job in answering all the questions, and it ended the night. Ended, in my opinion, with the understanding that we're going to have a little bit of turbulence as we go forward, but everybody looks forward to a very successful end product. And finally, I have to make a motion totally unrelated to all this thing. It has to do with the Arbutus Point erosion. And the motion is that Council indicated strong support for the City of Parksville's application for a Crown land tenure to permit the installation and occupation of erosion protection works at Arbutus Point in the community park. I can speak to that, Your Worship. Yeah, the province of BC has indicated that they need a council resolution, and that's why I'm bringing it forward. It's for the Arbutus Point Erosion Control Land Act application, and you know, this is yet another barrier that they're putting up, another hoop that we got to jump through. So that's one of the things we got to do. So let's give the staff all their tools that they need to go and get this worthwhile project finished.
I'd just like to add that, you know, it's very important that we get that project done this summer, and this is, you know, the name of the game is we really got to move on this, because we were supposed to do it last summer. We ran into some issues, and those issues have now been clarified. So on that note, unless there's any questions, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you for making that unanimous. Anything else, Councillor Rhodes? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to remind everyone about the recreation survey that everyone should have received. If you haven't, you can go to Oceanside Place and pick up a paper copy or go online. I also attended the curling on the Thursday night just after Councillor Powell, and we have some amazing volunteers in this community and amazing ice. And so it would be kind of ties in with that recreation survey and our RDN and things like that, but we're going to have to think about that one in the future soon. Coldest night I was involved in as well a little bit, and it's a huge amount of emotion with walkers and volunteers, and as Councillor Beale said, they are still taking donations, and it is a definite need in this community. As I mentioned already about youth, grades 10s to grade 12, and I have a meeting tomorrow, and we'll fill out some paperwork, so you're going to get to hear some more of what they've been doing. And then the other one is Canada 150. Great meeting. Hats off again to staff in so many different ways that they have. You don't really realize how much hours that some of our staff put in. But when you see them here on Saturday afternoons and in after work hours and that, so just kudos. But our Director of Communications will be bringing back some of the conversation that we had with so many great groups in this community, and great recommendations and things that maybe we could do in the city of Parksville. So thank you.
Well, I wanted to thank everybody that stood in for me while I was away all of last week. I want to thank Councillor Oates and Councillor Powell and Councillor Salter. I have just a few things to talk about. On March 25th, in partnership with the VIU, we heard that tonight the city will host a World Cafe, an open house at the Parksville Community and Conference Center. The World Cafe will build on this weekend's Parks in the Street exercise and is intended to draw ideas from citizens on what they would like to see for the future of their parks and trails. All that information is on the city's website, so keep that date in mind. That's a very important date for everybody to participate. This coming Sunday, March the 12th, is Parksville Water Day. Team Water Smart is hosting a free festival-style community event at the Parksville Community and Conference Center from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. There will be something for everyone with workshops, demos, displays, children's activities, food vendors, and live music. So I hope everybody can attend that. And I guess it's all sold out, but the Glassies are on Thursday night. Really big show. So we'll have some of that. All right. So on that note, I'm going to I need a mover and a seconder to move into camera. I have a moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beale. Pursuant to Section 91C and E of the Community Charter, Council proceed to a closed meeting to consider items related to labor and land. So everybody in favor? We're moving into camera. We'll take a 5-minute break.